The Storm Wardens stand as one of the Imperium's most enigmatic space marine chapters, their origins shrouded in deliberate obscurity and self-imposed amnesia. Unlike many chapters whose lineage can be traced through meticulous Imperial records, the Storm Wardens exist in a state of historical uncertainty that they themselves have chosen to maintain. The exact circumstances of their founding remain unclear, though most sources within the Adeptus Terra suggest they do not hail from the infamous 21st founding, often called the Cursed Founding, due to the genetic instabilities and mutations that plagued many of its chapters. Instead, evidence points to an earlier founding, though which specific founding remains a matter of speculation among those few Imperial scholars with access to fragmentary records. The gene seed lineage of the Storm Wardens presents another layer of mystery. Various theories circulate among the Ordo Astartes and other organizations concerned with monitoring space marine chapters. Some suggest a connection to the Ultramarines and their Primarch Robute Guilliman, given certain tactical similarities and organizational structures that align with Codex Astartes principles. Others point to potential links with the Space Wolves and Leman Russ, noting the Storm Wardens' affinity for close-quarters combat and their tribal-influenced culture. The chapter itself maintains silence on this matter, neither confirming nor denying any particular lineage. This ambiguity serves their purposes, as the truth of their genetic heritage lies buried beneath layers of deliberately forgotten history. What sets the Storm Wardens apart from nearly every other chapter in the Imperium is their unprecedented act of collective memory erasure. At some point in their early history, the entire chapter underwent a process of psychic mind-wiping that removed all knowledge of their founding, their first campaigns, and the events that transpired during their earliest decades of existence. This was not an accident or the result of enemy action, but a conscious decision made by the chapter's leadership. The reasons for this drastic measure remain locked away, known only to the chapter's librarians who guard this secret with absolute devotion. Even the chapter master himself does not possess full knowledge of what necessitated such extreme action. The ritual of forgetting, as it has come to be known within the chapter's oral traditions, involved every battle brother from the newest scout to the most veteran warrior. The chapter's librarians, those psychers who serve as both warriors and wielders of the warp's power, conducted the psychic procedure that stripped away specific memories while leaving combat skills, tactical knowledge, and personal identity intact. The selective nature of this mind-wiping demonstrates a level of psychic sophistication that suggests the involvement of highly trained individuals, possibly with assistance from outside the chapter itself. Some speculate that inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus may have participated, given their expertise in matters of memory modification and their authority to sanction such extreme measures when dealing with knowledge too dangerous to preserve. The chapter maintains a sealed vault within their fortress monastery, accessible only to the chief librarian and his most trusted subordinates. Within this vault, records of their true founding and the events that led to the memory erasure supposedly exist, preserved in stasis, locked data cores, and psychically warded tomes. These records serve as a safeguard, ensuring that the knowledge is not lost entirely, but merely removed from common access. The chief librarian bears the burden of deciding whether circumstances warrant unsealing this vault, a responsibility that weighs heavily on each individual who assumes this position. In the chapter's entire recorded history since the memory erasure, the vault has been opened only a handful of times, and never has its contents been shared with the wider chapter. Sacris, the world that became home to the Storm Wardens, lies within the Calixis sector, a region of space known for its proximity to numerous threats including Xenos incursions, chaos cults, and the ever-present danger of warp storms. The planet itself features harsh environments that test even space marines, with towering mountain ranges, deep ocean trenches, and violent weather patterns that give the chapter its name. The fortress monastery, known as the Eyrie, sits atop one of Sacris's highest peaks, a structure that combines defensive fortification with training facilities designed to push aspirants to their absolute limits. The planet's native population provides a steady stream of recruits, drawn from warrior tribes who have adapted to Sacris's unforgiving conditions over millennia. Integration into the Imperial defensive networks proceeded smoothly despite the chapter's mysterious origins. The Storm Wardens quickly established themselves as reliable defenders of the Imperium, responding to calls for aid across the Calixis sector and beyond. Their operational methodology emphasized rapid deployment and overwhelming force applied at critical points, a doctrine that proved effective against the diverse threats facing the region. The chapter maintained cordial but distant relationships with other Imperial institutions, including the sector's battle fleet, the Adeptus Mechanicus forges that supplied their equipment, and the various guard regiments stationed throughout the Calixis sector. The development of the Storm Wardens' combat doctrines occurred through practical experience rather than inherited tradition. Without memories of their earliest engagements, the chapter essentially rebuilt its tactical philosophy from first principles, guided by the Codex Astartes, but adapted to their specific circumstances and preferences. They showed particular aptitude for boarding actions and ship-to-ship combat, skills that served them well given the Calixis sector's importance as a trade route and the constant threat of piracy and raiding. Their battle brothers trained extensively in zero-gravity combat, breaching techniques, and the use of storm shields paired with close combat weapons, a combination that became one of their signature approaches. The chapter organized itself into the standard 10 companies, with the first company comprising their veteran Terminators, the 2nd through 5th as battle companies, the 6th through 9th as reserve companies, and the 10th as the scout company. However, they developed unique traditions within this framework. Each company maintained its own identity through heraldry and battle honors, with individual squads earning names based on their deeds rather than simple numerical designations. This emphasis on earned recognition rather than inherited glory reflected the chapter's fresh start following their memory erasure. Early campaigns saw the Storm Wardens engaged against Orc raiders threatening shipping lanes, Chaos cultists attempting to establish footholds on Imperial worlds, and Dark Eldar corsairs conducting slave raids throughout the sector. Each engagement added to the chapter's growing reputation and refined their tactical approaches. They demonstrated particular effectiveness against void-based threats, their fortress monastery's location on Sacris allowing them to maintain a small fleet of strike cruisers and rapid response vessels. The chapter's techmarines worked closely with the forge worlds of the Calixis sector to ensure their ships and equipment remained in optimal condition, relationships that would prove valuable in the millennia to come. The Storm Wardens also developed strong psychic traditions, with their librarius playing a more prominent role than in many other chapters. This emphasis on psychic power stemmed partly from necessity, as the librarians served as guardians of the chapter's forgotten past, but also from the discovery that many recruits from Sacris possessed latent psychic potential. The chapter's training regimens for these individuals proved rigorous and effective, producing librarians capable of both devastating offensive power and subtle psychic manipulation. These psykers became integral to the chapter's combat doctrine, often deployed alongside assault units to provide both psychic support and close combat prowess. The Eyrie rises from the highest peaks of Sacris like a blade thrust into the planet's turbulent skies. Built into and upon Mount Scathar, the fortress monastery of the Storm Wardens represents both a marvel of Imperial engineering and a deliberate statement of the chapter's philosophy. The structure extends deep into the mountain's core, with excavated chambers and halls reaching down through kilometers of solid rock, while its upper spires pierce through the cloud layer to survey the death world below. The architecture reflects practical military necessity rather than ornamental excess, with thick adamantium-reinforced walls, overlapping fields of fire, and defensive positions designed to repel everything from ground assaults to orbital bombardments. The exterior presents a fortress in the truest sense. Massive bastions project from the mountainside at strategic intervals, each housing batteries of defense lasers and macro cannons capable of engaging threats in both atmospheric and low orbital environments. Landing platforms jut from the rock face, protected by void shields and servitor-operated gun emplacements that track any approaching craft. The main gates, forged from layered ceramite and blessed by the chapter's techmarines, stand 30 meters high and thick enough to withstand sustained artillery fire. Above these gates, the chapter's symbol, a lightning bolt crossed with a sword, has been carved directly into the mountain stone, visible to anyone approaching from the valley floor thousands of meters below. Inside, the fortress monastery divides into distinct zones, each serving specific functions within the chapter's operations. The upper levels house the command facilities, including the chapter master's stratageum, communications arrays linking the Storm Wardens to Imperial forces throughout the Calixis sector, and the quarters of the senior officers. These areas maintain a Spartan aesthetic, with bare stone walls adorned only with battle honors and captured enemy banners. The stratagem itself centers around a massive hololithic projector capable of displaying tactical information across multiple star systems simultaneously, fed by data streams from the chapter's fleet and ground forces. The training halls occupy the middle sections of the fortress sprawling complexes where battle brothers hone their skills between deployments. These chambers include everything from firing ranges, where Astartes practice with bolters at distances exceeding a kilometer, to close-quarters combat arenas, where warriors engage in practice duels using powered-down weapons. One particularly notable facility recreates the interior of various ship types, allowing the chapter to maintain their proficiency in boarding actions and void combat. Servitors constantly reconfigure these mock ship sections, ensuring that training scenarios remain unpredictable and challenging even for veteran warriors. The Reclusiam stands as a solemn space where the chapter's chaplains tend to the spiritual needs of the battle brothers. Unlike some chapters where the Reclusiam serves primarily as a place of contemplation, the Storm Wardens version functions as an active center for maintaining the chapter's collective identity in the absence of complete historical records. The chaplains conduct regular ceremonies, reinforcing the values and traditions that define the Storm Wardens, creating a living culture that compensates for the missing centuries of their past. Relics recovered from battlefields across the Calixis sector line the walls, each accompanied by detailed accounts of the engagement where it was claimed. These artifacts serve as tangible proof of the chapter's valor and sacrifice, anchoring their identity in deeds rather than origins. Deep within the mountain's heart lies the Vault of Remembrance, the most heavily guarded location in the entire fortress monastery. Access requires passing through multiple checkpoints, each staffed by veteran battle brothers sworn to defend this section with their lives. Psychic wards woven by generations of librarians permeate the rock itself, creating barriers that would alert the entire librarius to any unauthorized intrusion. The vault's entrance consists of a single door inscribed with high Gothic warnings about the dangers contained within, sealed by mechanisms that respond only to the chief librarian's genetic signature and psychic imprint. Within the Vault of Remembrance rest the Storm Warden's most dangerous secrets. Data cores preserved in stasis fields contain the original records of the chapter's founding, the campaigns that necessitated the memory erasure, and the true nature of whatever threat or knowledge proved too dangerous for the chapter to retain. Physical documents, their pages treated with preservative unguents and stored in atmospherically controlled cases, provide redundant records in case of technological failure. Psychically attuned crystals hold impressions of memories extracted during the Great Forgetting, accessible only to psychers of sufficient strength and clearance. The chief librarian alone maintains regular access to these materials, bearing the burden of knowledge that could potentially damn the entire chapter if revealed improperly. Adjacent chambers sealed with similar precautions contain artifacts recovered from the chapter's earliest campaigns. Some of these items radiate psychic signatures that would disturb unshielded minds, while others bear physical characteristics suggesting exposure to warp energies or Xenos technologies. Each artifact sits within its own containment field, monitored by automated systems that would trigger immediate lockdown protocols if any showed signs of activation or corruption. The Storm Wardens refuse to destroy these items despite their dangerous nature, viewing them as essential evidence that might one day prove necessary to understand their past or defend against similar threats. The chapter's librarius maintains facilities throughout the fortress monastery, but their primary sanctum occupies a tower that rises separately from the main structure, connected only by a single fortified bridge. This isolation serves practical purposes, as the psychic exercises and rituals conducted by the librarians can generate warp disturbances that might affect other battle brothers. The tower contains meditation chambers where individual librarians practice controlling their powers, libraries housing texts on psychic phenomena and warp theory, and a central chamber where the most powerful rituals take place under the chief librarian's supervision. The librarian's most critical responsibility involves maintaining the psychic wards protecting the Vault of Remembrance and other sealed sections. These wards require constant renewal, as the energies involved gradually degrade over time. Senior librarians conduct weekly rituals to reinforce the primary barriers, while junior members handle the lesser wards protecting individual artifacts and chambers. The process demands intense concentration and significant psychic strength, as each ward must be carefully layered to prevent both physical intrusion and psychic scrying. The Storm Wardens librarians have developed techniques for ward construction that some consider among the most sophisticated outside the Grey Knights, though such comparisons remain speculative given the secretive nature of both organizations. Recruitment from Sacris's population follows patterns established shortly after the chapter settled on the world. The planet's natives organized themselves into tribal confederations, each controlling territories defined by mountain ranges, coastlines, or river valleys. These tribes maintain warrior traditions dating back thousands of years, with young men and women proving themselves through ritualized combat, dangerous hunts, and tests of endurance against Sacris's hostile environment. The Storm Wardens observe these trials, identifying candidates who display not just physical prowess, but also mental resilience and tactical thinking. The chapter's chaplains and apothecaries descend from the Eyrie periodically to collect promising youths, typically between the ages of 10 and 14, when the gene seed implantation process has the highest success rates. The tribes view selection by the Storm Wardens as the highest honor, with entire communities celebrating when one of their own ascends to the fortress monastery. Families understand they will likely never see their children again, but the prestige and protection afforded to tribes that produce successful recruits ensures no shortage of candidates. Once brought to the Eyrie, aspirants face trials designed to test every aspect of their capability. The first challenges focus on physical endurance, with candidates required to climb sections of Mount Scathar without assistance, survive in designated wilderness areas with minimal equipment, and demonstrate proficiency with various weapons. Those who fail these initial tests either die in the attempt or return to their tribes, their failure bringing no shame as merely reaching the fortress monastery alive proves their worth as warriors. Aspirants who survive the physical trials then face psychological evaluation. The chapter's chaplains conduct extensive interviews, probing for signs of mental instability, excessive aggression, or weakness of will. They also test each candidate's ability to work within a squad structure, as the Storm Wardens value tactical coordination alongside individual prowess. These evaluations can last weeks, with aspirants subjected to stress positions, sleep deprivation, and simulated combat scenarios that push them to their breaking points. The final stage before gene seed implantation involves psychic screening by the librarius. Every aspirant undergoes examination by at least one librarian, who probes their minds for latent psychic potential and signs of warp corruption. Sacris's population shows higher rates of psychic ability than many other recruiting worlds, possibly due to environmental factors or genetic drift within the isolated tribal populations. Aspirants identified as psychers receive additional scrutiny, as their potential value to the chapter must be weighed against the risks inherent in training psychically active individuals. Those deemed suitable begin the long process of becoming librarians, while others join the standard battle companies. The gene seed implantation process follows established Adeptus Astartes protocols, with the chapter's apothecaries surgically installing the 19 organs that will transform aspirants into space marines. The process takes years, with each organ requiring time to integrate with the recipient's body before the next can be added. Throughout this period, aspirants continue their training, learning the Codex Astartes, studying imperial history and the Storm Wardens' recorded traditions, and practicing with the weapons they will wield as full battle brothers. The hypnotherapy and chemical treatments that accompany physical transformation also indoctrinate aspirants into the chapter's culture, instilling loyalty and the values that define the Storm Wardens. The fortress monastery's strategic position within the Calixis sector makes it a critical asset for imperial defense. Mount Scathar's height provides clear sight lines across hundreds of kilometers, allowing the Storm Wardens to monitor approaching threats long before they reach the fortress itself. The auger arrays installed throughout the upper levels can detect orbital insertions, atmospheric craft, and even ground movements at extreme ranges. This early warning capability has prevented multiple surprise attacks over the centuries, giving the chapter time to marshal defenses or launch preemptive strikes. The Erie's defensive capabilities extend beyond simple fortifications. Void shield generators buried deep in the mountain's core project overlapping protective barriers that can absorb tremendous punishment before failing. During one recorded incident, an orc warband attempting to assault Sacris subjected the fortress to 3 days of continuous bombardment from captured Imperial artillery pieces, only to exhaust their ammunition without breaching the shields. The chapter's counter-attack eliminated the orcs within hours once the bombardment ceased. Against warp-based threats, the fortress monastery employs multiple layers of protection. The psychic wards maintained by the Librarius create a barrier against demonic incursion and psychic attack, while Geller field projectors similar to those used on void ships can be activated during severe warp storms. The chapter has also incorporated blessed materials into the fortress's construction, with key structural elements forged from metals treated with holy unguents and inscribed with protective prayers. These precautions proved their worth when a chaos cult attempted to summon entities within Sacris's capital city. The psychic backlash from the failed summoning washed over the fortress monastery without effect, the wards absorbing and dissipating the warp energies before they could manifest physically. The question of the Storm Warden's genetic lineage remains one of the most persistent mysteries surrounding the chapter, debated by scholars of the Adeptus Terra and scrutinized by the Ordo Astartes with inconclusive results. The chapter's own records provide no definitive answer, either because such information was among the memories deliberately erased or because it was never clearly documented in the first place. Various theories circulate among those few Imperial officials with access to comparative gene seed data, each supported by circumstantial evidence, but none proven beyond doubt. The Ultramarines' lineage theory draws support from several observable factors. The Storm Wardens organize themselves according to Codex Astartes principles, maintaining the standard 10-company structure and adhering to tactical doctrines that align with Robute Guilliman's strategic philosophies. Their gene seed demonstrates the stability and purity characteristic of Ultramarine stock, with minimal mutation rates and reliable implantation success. The chapter's apothecaries report that all 19 implanted organs function within expected parameters, showing none of the degradation or loss that afflicts some other bloodlines. The progenitor glands mature on schedule, producing viable gene seed for the next generation of battle brothers, without the accelerated or delayed development seen in certain successor chapters. However, other characteristics suggest alternative possibilities. The Storm Wardens display an unusual affinity for psychic disciplines, with their recruitment from Sacris yielding a higher proportion of psyker candidates than typical for Ultramarine successors. Their combat preferences lean heavily toward close-quarters engagement and boarding actions, tactical specializations more commonly associated with chapters of different genetic heritage. The Battle Brothers themselves exhibit a pronounced resistance to psychic influence and warp-based attacks, a trait that manifests beyond what standard librarian training would account for. Some observers note similarities to the Space Wolves in this regard, though the Storm Wardens lack other defining characteristics of Leman, Russ's gene line such as the Canis helix, and its associated physiological changes. The chapter's apothecarian maintains exhaustive records of gene seed purity and stability, documentation that spans centuries of monitoring and analysis. Each progenitor gland harvested from fallen or retiring battle brothers undergoes detailed examination before storage in the chapter's gene seed repositories deep within the eyrie. The apothecaries test for genetic drift, mutation markers, and compatibility with the chapter's existing stock. These records show remarkable consistency, with rejection rates during implantation remaining below 3% across the documented history. Such stability suggests either ultramarines' heritage or another stable gene line, though it does not definitively prove either possibility. The Storm Wardens' chief apothecary oversees all gene seed-related operations, maintaining direct communication with the Adeptus Mechanicus Biologus facilities that provide technical analysis beyond the chapter's own capabilities. Periodically, samples of Storm Wardens' gene seed undergo examination by Mechanicus genitors, who compare the genetic markers against template patterns from known Primarch bloodlines. These analyses have produced frustratingly ambiguous results, with some markers suggesting Guilliman's heritage, while others show variations that could indicate different origins or simply natural genetic drift accumulated over millennia. The Mechanicus reports acknowledge these inconsistencies, but offer no conclusive determination, leaving the question of lineage unresolved. The implantation protocols followed by the chapter's apothecaries represent the culmination of centuries of refinement and practical experience. The process begins once aspirants complete their initial trials and receive approval from both the chaplaincy and librarius. The first organ implanted is always the secondary heart, installed in the aspirant's chest cavity to provide redundancy and enhanced blood circulation. The apothecaries perform this surgery under sterile conditions in the Fortress Monastery's Medicae facilities, using tools blessed by techmarines and sterilized according to ancient protocols. The operation takes several hours, with the aspirant maintained under anesthesia, while servo-assisted surgical equipment assists the apothecary in placing the organ with microscopic precision. Recovery from each implantation requires weeks of carefully monitored rest, during which the aspirant's body must accept the new organ and integrate it with existing biological systems. The apothecaries administer a regimen of hormonal treatments and genetic catalysts that encourage the body to recognize the implanted tissue as its own rather than rejecting it as foreign matter. Aspirants experience significant pain during this integration period, as their bodies restructure themselves at the cellular level. The chapter views this suffering as part of the transformation process, teaching aspirants to endure pain that would incapacitate or kill unmodified humans. Following successful integration of the secondary heart, the apothecaries proceed with the remaining organs in a carefully sequenced order. The os medulla comes next, implanting itself in the bone marrow, where it begins releasing hormones that strengthen and restructure the skeleton. Over the following 2 years, the aspirant's bones thicken and grow denser, with the ribcage fusing into a solid protective shell around vital organs. The biscopia implantation follows, triggering rapid muscle development that transforms the aspirant's physique into the massive build characteristic of Space Marines. These changes require enormous caloric intake, with aspirants consuming quantities of food that would sustain a dozen normal humans. The hemastamen organ integrates with the cardiovascular system, improving blood efficiency and oxygen distribution throughout the rapidly growing body. The Laramens organ provides enhanced clotting capability, allowing wounds that would prove fatal to normal humans to seal themselves within minutes. The catalepsian node alters sleep patterns, enabling battle brothers to rest one hemisphere of their brain while the other remains conscious and alert. Each organ brings its own challenges during implantation and integration, with failure rates varying based on the organ's complexity and the aspirant's genetic compatibility. The Storm Wardens track success rates meticulously, maintaining records that allow them to identify patterns and improve their procedures over time. Current data indicates that approximately 65% of aspirants who begin the implantation process survive to become full battle brothers. This rate compares favorably to many other chapters, particularly those recruiting from less harsh worlds than Sacris. The initial trials eliminate the weakest candidates before any gene seed is risked, ensuring that only those with the highest probability of success undergo the expensive and resource-intensive transformation process. Failures during implantation typically result from organ rejection, where the aspirant's immune system attacks the foreign tissue despite the chemical suppressants and genetic treatments. Such rejections can occur suddenly, with the aspirant's body entering catastrophic shock as multiple systems fail simultaneously. The apothecaries maintain constant vigilance for signs of rejection, monitoring biological markers and conducting regular examinations throughout the implantation period. When rejection occurs, they must decide whether to attempt salvaging the situation through additional surgery and treatment or to acknowledge failure and end the aspirant's suffering. Those who survive failed implantations but cannot continue the process sometimes serve the chapter as serfs, their enhanced physiology making them valuable for tasks requiring strength or endurance beyond normal human capability. Certain physiological traits manifest consistently among Storm Wardens' battle brothers, characteristics that distinguish them from Astartes of other chapters. Their resistance to psychic attack exceeds normal parameters, with battle brothers demonstrating an innate ability to shrug off mental intrusions and warp-based effects that would disorient or control warriors from other bloodlines. This resistance operates independently of conscious effort, functioning as an automatic defense that activates when psychic pressure is applied to their minds. Librarians within the chapter report that this trait makes Storm Wardens' battle brothers more difficult to contact through telepathy, requiring stronger psychic signals to establish communication than would be necessary with Astartes of other gene lines. The source of this psychic resistance remains unclear. Some apothecaries theorize it results from genetic factors within the gene seed itself, possibly indicating heritage from a Primarch who possessed similar capabilities. Others suggest the high concentration of latent psychers in Sacris's population might trigger adaptive responses in the gene seed, producing enhanced resistance as a natural defense mechanism. The chapter's librarians propose a third possibility, that the psychic wards permeating the eyrie and the constant exposure to controlled warp energies during training gradually strengthen each battle brother's natural defenses. Whatever the cause, this resistance proves tactically valuable when facing psyker-dependent enemies such as Chaos Sorcerers or Eldar Warlocks. Storm Wardens' battle brothers also display pronounced aggression in close combat situations, a psychological predisposition that manifests during boarding actions and melee engagements. This trait does not represent mindless rage or loss of control, but rather a heightened focus and intensity when fighting at close quarters. Battle brothers report experiencing enhanced clarity during melee combat, with time seeming to slow as their enhanced reflexes and neural processing allow them to track multiple opponents simultaneously. This state of heightened awareness combines with physical capabilities to make Storm Wardens particularly deadly in confined spaces where ranged weapons prove less effective. The chapter's preference for storm shields and close combat weapons reflects this natural inclination, with training regimens emphasizing the skills necessary to close with enemies and destroy them in direct confrontation. Veterans of the First Company wield thunder hammers and storm shields in Terminator armor, advancing through enemy fire to deliver devastating strikes that can crack open battle tanks or crush lesser opponents entirely. The psychological conditioning that accompanies gene seed implantation reinforces these aggressive tendencies, teaching battle brothers to embrace close combat as the purest form of warfare where skill and courage determine victory. Monitoring for genetic mutation constitutes a constant priority for the apothecarian. Every battle brother undergoes regular medical examinations that check for signs of deviation from baseline parameters. The apothecaries test tissue samples, analyze blood chemistry, and conduct genetic sequencing to identify any changes that might indicate corruption or instability. These examinations occur quarterly for active battle brothers and more frequently for those showing any unusual symptoms. The chapter maintains zero tolerance for genetic impurity, understanding that even minor mutations can cascade into serious problems if left unchecked. The progenitor glands receive particular attention during these examinations. Each battle brother possesses two of these organs, one implanted in the neck and another in the chest cavity. These glands gradually mature over years, absorbing genetic material from the other implanted organs and the battle brother's own body to create new gene seed. The neck progenitor reaches maturity after 5 years, while the chest progenitor requires 10 years of development. Apothecaries can harvest the neck progenitor from living battle brothers, though this occurs only in circumstances where the chapter faces critical gene seed shortages. The chest progenitor is typically recovered only from fallen warriors, extracted by apothecaries on the battlefield, or from bodies returned to the eyrie. Each harvested progenitor can produce 2 sets of gene seed organs, allowing the chapter to maintain and slowly expand its numbers over time. The Storm Wardens store their gene seed reserves in specialized vaults maintained at precise temperatures and atmospheric conditions. Stasis fields preserve the genetic material indefinitely, protecting it from degradation or contamination. The chapter maintains sufficient reserves to rebuild itself from catastrophic losses, though such reserves represent decades or centuries of accumulated gene seed that would take generations to replace if expended. The psychological profile of Storm Wardens' battle brothers shows consistency across companies and generations, suggesting that certain mental characteristics derive from their genetic heritage rather than purely from training and indoctrination. Battle brothers display strong loyalty to squad mates and brothers, forming tight bonds that extend beyond simple military cooperation. This loyalty manifests in a willingness to risk death for fellow warriors and a deep-seated need for vengeance when brothers fall in battle. The chapter's culture reinforces these tendencies, teaching that a battle brother's greatest duty lies in protecting those who fight beside him. Storm Wardens also exhibit a pragmatic approach to warfare that prioritizes mission success over personal glory. Unlike some chapters where individual heroics receive primary emphasis, the Storm Wardens value tactical coordination and mutual support. Battle brothers learn to suppress ego in favor of squad cohesion, understanding that synchronized action produces better results than individual excellence. This mindset serves them well in the confined spaces of ship corridors and boarding actions, where disciplined teamwork proves essential for survival and victory. The chapter's relationship with its gene seed extends beyond practical considerations of purity and viability into matters of identity and continuity. Without clear knowledge of their primarch or founding, the Storm Wardens view their gene seed as the physical link connecting them across generations. Each battle brother carries within his body genetic material passed down from warriors who served centuries earlier, a biological chain of inheritance that transcends the gaps in their historical records. The chaplains emphasize this connection during ceremonies and rituals, teaching new battle brothers that they literally embody the chapter's legacy, regardless of what memories were lost during the Great Forgetting. The Storm Wardens maintain an organizational framework that adheres closely to the principles established in the Codex Astartes, though practical experience and their unique circumstances have produced specific variations that distinguish them from strictly Codex-compliant chapters. The standard 10-company structure provides the foundation for their operations, with each company fulfilling designated roles within the chapter's overall combat doctrine. This organizational approach allows the Storm Wardens to deploy forces ranging from small kill teams to full company strength operations, depending on mission requirements, maintaining the flexibility that Robute Guilliman intended when he authored the Codex following the Horus Heresy. The first company represents the chapter's elite, comprising approximately 100 veteran warriors who have proven themselves across decades or even centuries of combat. These battle brothers have earned the right to wear tactical dreadnought armor, the massive Terminator suits that transform already formidable space marines into walking fortresses capable of withstanding punishment that would obliterate lesser warriors. The Storm Wardens' first company specializes in the most dangerous missions, including boarding actions against enemy vessels, assaults on fortified positions, and operations requiring the absolute certainty that only the chapter's most experienced warriors can provide. Each member has served in multiple other companies before earning promotion to the first, accumulating tactical knowledge and combat experience that makes them invaluable assets during complex operations. The first company's organization differs slightly from some other chapters in that the Storm Wardens maintain a higher proportion of their veterans equipped for close-quarters combat rather than ranged engagement. Approximately 60% of First Company Battle Brothers carry storm shields paired with thunder hammers or power fists, weapons that complement the chapter's aggressive boarding doctrine. The remaining 40% employ storm bolters and other ranged weapons, providing covering fire as their shield-bearing brothers advance into contact with enemy forces. This distribution reflects lessons learned through centuries of void warfare, where confined ship corridors and compartments favor melee specialists who can advance under fire and destroy enemies in direct confrontation. The 2nd through 5th companies constitute the chapter's battle companies, each maintained at full strength with 100 battle brothers divided into 6 tactical squads, 2 assault squads, and 2 devastator squads. These companies represent the Storm Warden's primary striking power, capable of independent operation across extended campaigns or combining for major offensives requiring multiple company deployments. Each battle company maintains its own fleet assets, typically a strike cruiser supported by several rapid strike vessels and Thunderhawk gunships. This organic transportation capability allows the companies to respond quickly to threats throughout the Calixis sector without requiring coordination with other Imperial Navy assets. Company captains command these formations with considerable autonomy, making tactical and strategic decisions based on local conditions and their own judgment. The chapter master provides overall strategic direction and assigns companies to specific operational theaters, but individual captains determine how best to accomplish their assigned missions. This delegation of authority reflects both practical necessity, given the vast distances involved in sector-wide operations, and the Storm Warden's confidence in their officers' capabilities. Captains earn their positions through demonstrated competence rather than political maneuvering, with the chapter's meritocratic culture ensuring that only the most capable warriors rise to command positions. The 6th through 9th companies serve as reserve formations, each specializing in particular combat roles. The 6th and 7th companies consist entirely of tactical squads, providing reinforcements when battle companies require additional infantry or forming the core of larger battle groups during major campaigns. The 8th company comprises assault squads, warriors equipped with jump packs who specialize in rapid insertion and close-quarters combat. The 9th company fields devastator squads, heavy weapons specialists who provide fire support during sustained engagements. These reserve companies rarely deploy as complete formations, instead contributing squads or individual combat teams to augment battle company operations based on specific mission requirements. The 10th company occupies a unique position within the chapter's structure, responsible for recruitment, training, and the initial combat deployment of Scout Marines. Unlike full battle brothers, Scouts have not yet received all 19 gene seed implants and lack the black carapace that allows interface with power armor. They wear lighter scout armor and carry weapons suited to reconnaissance and infiltration missions rather than direct assault. The 10th Company's strength fluctuates between 50 and 100 scouts depending on recruitment cycles and casualty rates, with new aspirants constantly entering training as older scouts complete their development and transfer to reserve companies. Scout training under the Storm Wardens emphasizes skills that will prove valuable throughout a Battle Brother's career. Scouts learn reconnaissance techniques, including how to move undetected through hostile territory, gather intelligence on enemy dispositions, and identify priority targets for elimination. They practice marksmanship with sniper rifles and bolt pistols, developing the accuracy that will later translate to effective use of bolters and heavy weapons. Close quarters combat receives particular attention, as scouts often operate in environments where stealth fails, and they must fight their way clear of enemy contact. The chapter's emphasis on boarding actions means scouts train extensively in confined space combat, learning to navigate ship interiors and clear compartments using coordinated squad tactics. The scout company's leadership structure includes multiple sergeants, each responsible for training and leading a squad of approximately 10 scouts. These sergeants are typically veterans drawn from the battle companies, warriors with extensive experience who can pass their knowledge to the next generation. They accompany their squads on combat deployments, providing guidance and supervision, while allowing scouts to gain practical experience under controlled conditions. Missions assigned to scout squads generally involve lower-risk objectives, such as reconnaissance of suspected enemy positions, monitoring of potential threats, or supporting roles during larger operations where they can contribute without facing the heaviest fighting. The chapter's librarius exercises authority and responsibility that exceeds the typical role of psychic specialists in most codex-compliant chapters. This enhanced position derives directly from the librarian's custodial duties regarding the Storm Wardens' forgotten history and the secrets locked within the Vault of Remembrance. The chief librarian ranks among the chapter's most powerful figures. His authority in matters involving psychic phenomena, warp-related threats, and access to restricted knowledge, placing him nearly equal to the chapter master himself. During council meetings where strategic decisions are made, the chief librarian's voice carries weight that other officers cannot easily dismiss, particularly when discussions touch on subjects related to the chapter's past or potential chaos contamination. The librarius typically maintains between 15 and 20 active librarians at any given time, a higher proportion than many other chapters of comparable size. This larger establishment reflects both the availability of psychically gifted recruits from Sacris and the extensive responsibilities the librarians shoulder beyond standard combat duties. Each battle company includes at least one librarian assigned to its permanent roster, providing psychic support during deployments and serving as the company's connection to the broader librarius network. Additional librarians remain at the Eyrie, where they maintain the psychic wards protecting sensitive areas, train newly identified psychers, and conduct research into warp phenomena under the chief librarian's supervision. Librarians within the Storm Wardens undergo training that extends far beyond the psychic disciplines taught to their counterparts in other chapters. They must master not only offensive and defensive psychic techniques, but also the subtle arts of memory manipulation, psychic warding, and mental defense against warp entities. The chief librarian personally instructs senior librarians in the most dangerous techniques, knowledge passed down through generations that allows them to maintain the seals on the Vault of Remembrance and protect the chapter's secrets from psychic intrusion. This specialized training takes decades to complete, with librarians progressing through ranks based on demonstrated mastery rather than simple time in service. The librarius maintains its own hierarchy separate from the standard company structure. Epistolaries represent the most powerful librarians below the chief librarian himself, warriors who have mastered multiple psychic disciplines and can unleash devastating attacks or erect impenetrable mental barriers. Codiciers form the middle ranks, competent psychers who have completed their basic training and serve as the standard librarians attached to battle companies. Lexicaniums are the most junior librarians, recently elevated from the scout company and still learning to fully control their abilities under combat conditions. This ranking system allows the chief librarian to assign appropriate support to different operations, matching librarian capabilities to mission requirements. The command hierarchy of the Storm Wardens places the chapter master at the apex of authority, though his power operates within constraints established by chapter tradition and the need for consensus among senior officers. The chapter master earns his position through election by the captains and senior officers rather than through hereditary succession or appointment by external authorities. When a chapter master falls in battle or chooses to retire into the reclusiam as a chaplain, the surviving leadership convenes to select his replacement. Candidates typically include company captains who have distinguished themselves through successful campaigns and demonstrated strategic thinking, though occasionally warriors from outside the standard command structure receive consideration if their accomplishments warrant it. The current selection process involves extensive deliberation among the chapter's senior officers, including all 10 company captains, the chief librarian, the master of sanctity who leads the chaplains, the master of the forge who oversees the techmarines, and the chief apothecary. Each officer casts a vote after hearing arguments for various candidates, with the position requiring a 2/3 majority to prevent deadlock. This democratic approach reflects the Storm Wardens' culture of earned merit and collective decision-making, ensuring that the chapter master commands genuine respect from his subordinates rather than relying purely on formal authority. Once selected, the chapter master assumes responsibility for the Storm Wardens' overall strategic direction, determining which threats receive priority attention and how the chapter's resources should be allocated across the Calixis sector and beyond. He maintains communication with imperial authorities, including the sector's Lord Commander Militant, the Inquisition, and representatives of the Adeptus Mechanicus, coordinating Storm Wardens' operations with broader imperial strategic objectives. The chapter master also serves as the final authority on matters of chapter tradition and the interpretation of their accumulated combat doctrine, though he typically consults with the captains and other senior officers before making decisions that affect the entire chapter. The inner circle represents the Storm Wardens' most closely guarded organizational element, a group of senior officers who possess knowledge of the chapter's deepest secrets. Membership in the inner circle includes the chapter master, the chief librarian, the master of sanctity, and typically 2 or 3 company captains, selected based on their trustworthiness and length of service. These individuals alone know the full truth of what lies sealed within the Vault of Remembrance, having been granted access to the forbidden records under carefully controlled circumstances. The inner circle meets in absolute secrecy when matters arise that touch upon the chapter's hidden past, or when decisions must be made regarding information too dangerous for general knowledge. The inner circle's existence remains unknown to the majority of battle brothers, who understand only that certain senior officers possess classified information related to the chapter's founding. This compartmentalization of knowledge serves as a security measure, ensuring that if the chapter faces infiltration or psychic interrogation, the most dangerous secrets remain protected within the minds of a handful of individuals trained to resist such intrusions. The chief librarian maintains psychic defenses within the minds of inner circle members, wards that would trigger automatic memory erasure if someone attempted to forcibly extract the protected information. This safeguard ensures that even capture and torture cannot compromise the Storm Wardens' most critical secrets. Company captains who do not belong to the inner circle still wield considerable authority within their own formations. Each captain commands his company's operations with minimal oversight, making tactical decisions during combat and administrative choices regarding training, equipment allocation, and personnel assignments. Captains maintain close relationships with their company's librarian, chaplain, and apothecary, forming an informal command council that addresses issues affecting the company's combat effectiveness and morale. This decentralized command structure allows the Storm Wardens to operate effectively across multiple theaters simultaneously, with individual companies capable of independent action for extended periods without requiring constant direction from the chapter master. The chapter maintains several specialist positions outside the standard company structure, officers who provide essential services to the entire organization. The Master of the Fleet oversees the Storm Wardens' naval assets, coordinating ship movements, maintenance schedules, and the training of battle brothers in void combat operations. The Master of the Arsenal manages the chapter's weapons and equipment, working closely with the Tech Marines to ensure that every battle brother has access to properly maintained gear. The Master of the Watch coordinates defensive operations around Sacris and the Eyrie, maintaining vigilance against potential threats to the chapter's home world. These specialists report directly to the chapter master, but exercise considerable autonomy within their areas of responsibility. The Storm Wardens approach warfare with a methodology forged through centuries of practical experience rather than inherited tradition. their combat doctrine representing an evolution of tactics, refined through countless engagements across the Calixis sector and beyond. Without access to memories of their earliest campaigns, the chapter developed its strategic philosophy through trial and error, analyzing each battle's outcome and incorporating successful techniques while discarding approaches that proved ineffective. This pragmatic foundation resulted in a combat doctrine that emphasizes rapid deployment, overwhelming force applied at critical points, and the seamless integration of specialized units to exploit enemy vulnerabilities. Rapid strike warfare forms the cornerstone of Storm Wardens' tactical thinking, with the chapter maintaining constant readiness to deploy forces anywhere within their operational theater on minimal notice. This capability derives from both material preparation and doctrinal emphasis, with Battle Brothers training extensively in rapid mobilization, procedures, and equipment pre-staged for immediate use. When threat assessments indicate the need for Space Marine intervention, Storm Wardens companies can launch from Sacris or their fleet assets within hours, a response time that frequently allows them to engage enemies before hostile forces can consolidate positions or complete whatever objectives prompted their incursion into Imperial space. Drop pod assaults represent the Storm Wardens' preferred method of planetary insertion when facing time-sensitive threats or heavily defended targets. The chapter maintains extensive stocks of drop pods aboard its strike cruisers and battle barges, enough to deploy entire companies in a single wave if tactical circumstances warrant such commitment. These armored insertion vehicles plummet through planetary atmospheres at velocities that would liquefy unaugmented humans, their heat shields glowing white-hot as friction converts orbital velocity into thermal energy. Storm Wardens' Battle Brothers ride within these metal coffins in complete darkness, their power armors auto-senses tracking descent trajectories, while they review final mission parameters through helmet displays. The moments before impact test even Space Marine physiology, with deceleration forces pressing Battle Brothers into their restraint harnesses despite the inertial dampeners built into each pod. The Storm Wardens train their warriors to use these final seconds productively, conducting last-minute weapons checks and reviewing squad assignments so that when the pod's hatches blow open, every Battle Brother knows exactly what he must do. The pods themselves serve as temporary fortifications once grounded, their armored hulls providing cover while squads orient themselves and begin advancing toward objectives. Enemy forces attempting to engage Storm Wardens during these critical first moments after landing often find themselves facing coordinated bolter fire from multiple pods simultaneously, the squads having practiced their immediate post-landing responses until they function with mechanical precision. Drop pod deployments allow the Storm Wardens to bypass enemy defensive perimeters entirely, placing their forces directly onto objectives that ground-based assaults would require hours or days to reach. This capability proves particularly valuable when facing enemies who rely on prepared positions and overlapping fields of fire to blunt conventional attacks. By inserting behind or within enemy lines, Storm Wardens forces can strike at command centers, artillery positions, and logistics nodes before defenders can reorient to meet the threat. The psychological impact of Space Marines suddenly appearing in areas enemies considered secure cannot be overstated, with many hostile forces breaking and fleeing when confronted by power-armored warriors who materialized seemingly from nowhere. Coordination between drop pod elements and supporting units represents a critical aspect of Storm Wardens' assault doctrine. While the initial insertion puts infantry squads on the ground, subsequent waves deliver dreadnoughts, vehicles, and heavy weapons teams that provide the firepower necessary to exploit the beachhead established by the first wave. Thunderhawk gunships orbit above landing zones, their weapons systems eliminating enemy reinforcements attempting to contain the Storm Wardens' insertion. The chapter's tech marines and vehicle crews train extensively in rapid deployment procedures, ensuring that tanks and transports can exit their drop pods and begin combat operations within minutes of touchdown. Infantry operations form the foundation upon which Storm Wardens' tactical doctrine builds, with the chapter maintaining unwavering confidence in the ability of well-trained battle brothers to accomplish objectives through disciplined application of firepower and maneuver. Tactical squads advance in coordinated formations, each squad maintaining visual contact with adjacent units while moving through hostile territory. Squad sergeants communicate constantly through Vox networks, sharing information about enemy positions, obstacles, and tactical opportunities that emerge during fluid combat situations. This networked approach to infantry combat allows Storm Wardens forces to respond rapidly to changing circumstances, with squads reinforcing success or shifting to address threats without requiring explicit orders from company commanders. The integration of armored elements with infantry operations distinguishes Storm Wardens' tactical doctrine from chapters that treat vehicle support as a separate operational layer. Storm Wardens' tank crews and infantry squads train together extensively, developing mutual understanding of each element's capabilities and limitations. Predator tanks advance alongside tactical squads, their autocannons and lascannons engaging targets that infantry weapons cannot effectively damage, while the squads provide close protection against enemy infantry, attempting to disable vehicles with melta-weapons or crack grenades. Rhino transports deliver squads to positions where they can maximize their combat effectiveness, then provide mobile cover and fire support rather than withdrawing to rear areas. This combined arms approach requires sophisticated coordination and constant communication between different unit types. Storm Wardens' vehicle commanders learn to read infantry tactical situations, positioning their vehicles to provide supporting fire without blocking line of sight for friendly squads or exposing themselves to unnecessary risk. Infantry sergeants develop understanding of vehicle capabilities, knowing when to call for tank support against hardened targets and when their squads can handle threats independently. The chapter's training grounds on Sacris include extensive facilities for practicing combined operations, with mock battles pitting infantry armored teams against simulated enemy forces in terrain ranging from urban environments to open plains. The Storm Wardens' expertise in combating demonic incursions and chaos-corrupted forces stems from both practical necessity and deliberate specialization, the chapter having faced warp spawned threats throughout its recorded history. The Calixis sector's proximity to unstable regions of space and the constant threat of chaos cult activity means Storm Wardens' battle brothers encounter demonic entities with disturbing frequency. These engagements taught the chapter that conventional tactics often prove insufficient against enemies that violate natural laws and wield reality warping powers. Over centuries, the Storm Wardens developed specialized approaches for engaging chaos forces, techniques that combine standard space marine combat doctrine with countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize demonic advantages. Anti-warp tactics employed by the Storm Wardens begin with proper mental preparation and spiritual fortification. The chapter's chaplains conduct blessing ceremonies before deployments against known or suspected chaos forces, leading battle brothers in prayers that reinforce their faith in the Emperor and strengthen their resistance to corruption. These rituals serve practical purposes beyond simple morale building, as the chaplains invoke psychic protections that create barriers against demonic influence. Battle brothers emerge from these ceremonies with minds fortified against the whispers and temptations that demons use to weaken mortal resolve, their determination hardened into unshakable conviction that no warp entity can easily penetrate. Blessed weaponry forms another critical component of the Storm Wardens' anti-chaos arsenal. The chapter's tech marines and chaplains work together to sanctify weapons and ammunition before battles against demonic forces, conducting rituals that infuse bolter rounds and blade edges with holy energies anathema to warp entities. These blessings do not transform standard equipment into artifacts of legendary power, but they provide measurable advantages when engaging targets whose existence defies material reality. Demon flesh that might shrug off normal bolter fire burns and tears when struck by sanctified rounds, while power weapons blessed by chaplains cut through warp spawned armor that would resist unsanctified blades. The Storm Wardens maintain dedicated stocks of specialized ammunition for use against demonic targets, including psych cannon bolts that incorporate fragments of psychically reactive materials and blessed silver rounds that prove particularly effective against certain classifications of warp entities. These specialized munitions receive careful storage in sealed containers inscribed with protective wards, preventing any potential corruption during long-term storage. Before deployment against Chaos forces, Tech Marines distribute these rounds to squads based on expected threat profiles, ensuring that Battle Brothers carry appropriate ammunition for the specific demon types they may encounter. Tactical deployment against demonic forces requires different considerations than conventional warfare. Storm Wardens commanders prioritize rapid engagement over careful positioning, understanding that demons grow stronger the longer they remain manifested in real space. This urgency drives aggressive tactics that close with enemy forces quickly, denying Chaos sorcerers time to summon additional entities or strengthen existing manifestations. Drop pod assaults prove particularly effective against demonic incursions. The sudden arrival of Storm Wardens forces disrupting ritual preparations and forcing enemy psychers to defend themselves rather than continuing their summoning efforts. The chapter's librarians play essential roles during anti-demon operations, their psychic abilities providing both offensive capability and defensive protection that conventional weapons cannot replicate. Storm Warden's tactical doctrine calls for librarians to deploy alongside assault elements when facing demonic threats, positioning these psychers where they can maximize their effectiveness against warp entities. A librarian's presence stabilizes reality in his immediate vicinity, making it harder for demons to maintain corporeal form and reducing the effectiveness of chaos sorcery. This reality anchoring effect extends several dozen meters from the librarian's position, creating zones where Battle Brothers can fight without facing the full supernatural capabilities that demons possess in areas saturated with warp energy. Offensive psychic disciplines employed by Storm Warden's librarians against demonic forces focus on disrupting the connection between warp entities and real space, rather than attempting to destroy demons through direct psychic attack. Librarians channel their power into techniques that weaken the barriers between dimensions in controlled ways, creating localized disturbances that force demons back into the Imperium. These banishment effects prove more reliable than trying to kill entities that lack true physical form, as even the most powerful demon cannot resist being drawn back into the warp when the energies sustaining its manifestation collapse. Experienced librarians can banish multiple lesser demons simultaneously, their psychic strength overwhelming the relatively weak connections that bind minor warp entities to real space. Integration of librarians into standard battle formations extends beyond their specialized anti-demon capabilities, with Storm Warden's tactical doctrine treating these psychers as force multipliers whose abilities enhance every aspect of combat operations. Each battle company's assigned librarian participates in regular training exercises alongside conventional squads, developing coordination and mutual understanding that allows seamless integration during actual deployments. Squad sergeants learn to recognize situations where psychic support can provide decisive advantages, while librarians develop instincts for positioning themselves where their powers can best support ongoing operations. Telepathic communication represents one of the most tactically valuable capabilities librarians bring to conventional operations. While Storm Warden's Battle Brothers maintain constant Vox contact during engagements, enemy jamming or environmental conditions sometimes disrupt these electronic communications. Librarians provide backup communication channels through telepathic links, connecting squad leaders and company commanders when conventional methods fail. These psychic connections carry additional advantages beyond simple reliability, as librarians can transmit complex tactical information instantaneously rather than requiring verbal description. A librarian observing enemy movements can share complete understanding of hostile dispositions with multiple recipients simultaneously, enabling coordinated responses faster than any verbal briefing could achieve. Precognitive abilities possessed by some Storm Wardens librarians offer tactical advantages that conventional reconnaissance cannot match. These psychers perceive echoes of potential futures, sensing danger before it manifests and detecting ambushes that would catch normal forces by surprise. While such visions rarely provide detailed or completely reliable information, they give commanders advance warning of threats and opportunities that allows proactive responses rather than reactive scrambling. A librarian's sudden certainty that enemy reinforcements approach from a specific direction, even when augur scans show nothing, receives serious consideration from Storm Wardens officers who have learned through experience that such warnings prove accurate more often than not. Offensive psychic powers supplement conventional firepower during sustained engagements, with librarians unleashing devastating attacks against priority targets or enemy concentrations. Psychic lightning arcs from outstretched hands to immolate squads of enemy infantry, while telekinetic forces hurl vehicles through the air or collapse structures onto hostile forces. These attacks prove particularly effective against enemies lacking psychic defenses, as few conventional forces possess countermeasures against warp-based assault. Storm Warden's tactical doctrine calls for librarians to prioritize targets that conventional weapons struggle to engage effectively, such as heavily armored vehicles, fortified positions, or enemy commanders protected by bodyguards. Defensive applications of psychic power protect Storm Warden's forces from threats ranging from enemy psychers to conventional artillery. Librarians erect force barriers that deflect incoming fire, create zones of psychic interference that disrupt enemy targeting systems, and counter hostile psychic attacks before they can affect battle brothers. The protective capabilities prove especially valuable when facing enemies who rely heavily on psychic assault, as a skilled librarian can neutralize enemy psychers while simultaneously supporting friendly operations. Storm Warden's battle brothers fighting alongside librarians report feeling tangible confidence from knowing that psychic threats will be addressed by specialists trained specifically for such encounters. The tactical advantages provided by integrated librarian support manifest most clearly during complex operations requiring coordination across multiple objectives. During a typical Storm Warden's assault on a fortified position, the company librarian might simultaneously maintain telepathic contact with all squad leaders, provide precognitive warnings about enemy counterattacks, launch psychic attacks against defensive emplacements, and erect protective barriers shielding advancing squads from enemy fire. This multitasking capability, impossible for conventional warriors regardless of training or equipment, allows librarians to influence battles at scales disproportionate to their individual presence. Notable battlefield strategies employed by the Storm Wardens demonstrate their reputation for adaptability and tactical innovation in response to diverse threat profiles. The chapter maintains detailed after-action records analyzing every significant engagement, with captains and senior sergeants studying these accounts to identify successful techniques and understand why certain approaches failed. This institutional learning process ensures that hard-won tactical lessons benefit the entire chapter rather than remaining isolated within individual companies. Storm Warden's battle brothers deploy with comprehensive understanding of how their chapter has successfully engaged various enemy types, from orc hordes to Eldar raiders to chaos warbands, drawing on accumulated experience that spans centuries of warfare. Against orc forces, Storm Warden's doctrine emphasizes eliminating enemy leadership and disrupting the greenskin tendency toward mob behavior. Drop pod assaults target warbosses and their immediate retinues, decapitating orc command structures before the Xenos can organize effective resistance. Storm Warden squads advance aggressively into close combat, where their superior training and equipment provide decisive advantages over the crude weapons and brawling tactics employed by most orcs. The chapter's preference for storm shields proves particularly effective against greenskin opponents, as the shields absorb the impact of orc choppas and crude firearms, while battle brothers deliver precise strikes that kill with mechanical efficiency. Engagement protocols against Eldar forces require different approaches given the Xeno's speed and technological sophistication. Storm Wardens' tactical doctrine against Eldar emphasizes denying the enemy room to maneuver, using rapid deployment to pin Eldar forces in place where their mobility advantages become irrelevant. Devastator squads equipped with heavy bolters and assault cannons lay down suppressive fire that forces Eldar infantry to seek cover, while assault squads equipped with jump packs pursue retreating enemies to prevent the Xenos from disengaging and redeploying elsewhere. The chapter's librarians prove invaluable during anti-Eldar operations, their psychic abilities allowing them to anticipate enemy movements and counter the psychic powers employed by Eldar warlocks. Chaos Space Marine warbands present perhaps the most challenging opponents Storm Wardens forces regularly face, as these traitors possess capabilities matching loyalist Space Marines while wielding demonic powers and corrupted technology. Engagements against Chaos Marines require Storm Wardens' battle brothers to leverage every advantage their training and equipment provide. The chapter's psychic resistance proves critical during these battles, as Chaos Sorcerers find their mental attacks and corruption attempts sliding off Storm Wardens' minds without effect. Blessed weapons and sanctified ammunition allow Storm Warden squads to damage Chaos Marines, whose armor has been enhanced through demonic pacts, while the chapter's librarians engage enemy psychers in direct psychic duels that often determine battle outcomes. The Storm Warden's willingness to adapt tactics based on enemy capabilities and environmental conditions has earned them recognition throughout the Calixis sector as reliable problem solvers capable of addressing threats that stymie more rigid forces. Imperial Guard commanders appreciate the chapter's practical approach to combined operations, as Storm Wardens officers coordinate effectively with conventional forces rather than dismissing Guard capabilities as beneath Space Marine notice. This cooperative attitude stems partly from the chapter's culture of earned merit and partly from pragmatic recognition that Guard regiments provide capabilities Space Marines cannot replicate, including sustained occupation of conquered territory and the numerical strength necessary for extended campaigns. Multi-theater operations across the Calixis sector and neighboring regions test the Storm Warden's organizational flexibility and strategic planning capabilities. The chapter typically maintains forces deployed across a dozen or more active war zones simultaneously, with individual companies operating independently for months at a time before rotating back to Sacris for rest and refit. This operational tempo requires sophisticated logistics and careful resource management, as the chapter must ensure that deployed forces receive adequate ammunition, replacement equipment, and reinforcements without depleting reserves needed to respond to new threats. The Master of the Fleet coordinates ship movements to maximize coverage while maintaining rapid response capabilities, positioning strike cruisers at locations that allow quick deployment to likely trouble spots. Communication across interstellar distances presents challenges that Storm Wardens commanders address through a combination of astropathic messaging and pre-established protocols that allow company captains to make decisions without waiting for guidance from the chapter master. Astropaths assigned to Storm Wardens vessels maintain constant contact with the Eyrie and with each other, transmitting situation reports and receiving strategic updates that keep the entire chapter informed of major developments. When astropathic communication proves impossible due to warp storms or enemy interference, captains rely on their training and understanding of the chapter's strategic priorities to make appropriate decisions, trusting that their judgment aligns with what the chapter master would order if communication were possible. The Librarius of the Storm Wardens occupies a position of authority and influence that extends far beyond the typical role assigned to psychic specialists in most Codex-compliant chapters. This expanded mandate stems directly from the unique circumstances of the chapter's founding and the catastrophic memory erasure that defines their early history. Where other chapters view their librarians primarily as combat assets who happen to wield psychic powers, the Storm Wardens recognize their psychers as essential custodians of knowledge too dangerous for common access and guardians against threats that conventional weapons cannot address. The Librarius maintains approximately 20 active members at any given time, a proportion nearly double what comparable chapters field, reflecting both the availability of psychically gifted recruits from Sacris and the extensive responsibilities these warriors shoulder. The organizational structure within the Storm Wardens Librarius follows established patterns while incorporating modifications that reflect the chapter's specific needs. The Chief Librarian commands absolute authority over all matters involving psychic phenomena, warp-related threats, and access to the sealed records within the Vault of Remembrance. His position places him among the chapter's most powerful officers, with influence rivaling the chapter master himself when discussions involve subjects touching on forbidden knowledge or potential chaos corruption. 3 epistolaries serve as the Chief Librarian's primary subordinates, each having mastered multiple psychic disciplines and demonstrated the mental fortitude necessary to handle the most dangerous assignments. These senior librarians rotate responsibility for maintaining the psychic wards, protecting critical areas of the Eyrie, conducting advanced training for junior members, and deploying with battle companies when operations require maximum psychic support. Below the epistolaries, approximately 8 to 10 codiciers form the Librarius's operational backbone. These librarians have completed their fundamental training and serve as the standard psychic support attached to battle companies during deployments. Each codicier has spent decades mastering the core disciplines taught to all Storm Warden psychers, including telepathy for battlefield communication, telekinesis for offensive applications, and the mental defense techniques that protect against psychic attack and demonic influence. Codiciers typically serve extended deployments with their assigned companies, developing working relationships with the captains and squad leaders that facilitate smooth integration during combat operations. The remaining members of the Librarius consist of Lexicaniums, junior librarians recently elevated from the Scout Company who continue their training while gaining practical experience under supervision from more experienced psychers. Training regimens for Storm Wardens, librarians begin the moment psychic potential manifests in an aspirant, usually during the initial screening process before gene seed implantation commences. The chapter's librarians conduct thorough examinations of every recruit, probing minds for signs of latent psychic ability that might emerge once the gene seed transformation amplifies all aspects of the individual's capabilities. Aspirants identified as possessing psychic potential face additional scrutiny, as the Librarius must determine whether each candidate has the mental strength to control powers that could easily destroy untrained wielders. Those deemed suitable enter a training program that runs parallel to the standard Scout development, but includes extensive instruction in psychic theory, meditation techniques, and the fundamental exercises that teach conscious control over warp energies. The early stages of librarian training emphasize mental discipline and the construction of internal barriers that protect the psycher's consciousness from warp entities seeking to exploit any opening in his defenses. Young librarians spend hours in meditation chambers specifically designed for psychic training, learning to perceive the currents of warp energy that flow through real space and recognizing the signatures that distinguish natural phenomena from demonic presence. Senior librarians guide these exercises, monitoring their students through psychic observation while remaining ready to intervene if training sessions spiral toward dangerous territory. The meditation chambers themselves incorporate psychic dampening fields that can be activated instantly if a student loses control, containing any manifestation before it threatens others within the fortress monastery. Mental fortification techniques taught to Storm Wardens librarians represent some of the most sophisticated psychic defense methodologies outside the Grey Knights and certain inquisitorial organizations. These techniques build layered defenses within the psycher's mind, creating barriers that function automatically without requiring conscious effort to maintain. The outermost layer consists of what librarians term surface thoughts, mundane considerations, and tactical analysis that any psychic probe would encounter first. These surface thoughts mask deeper mental processes, preventing casual psychic observation from detecting anything beyond what the librarian chooses to reveal. Behind this outer layer, additional barriers protect progressively more sensitive information, with the innermost defenses guarding knowledge of the chapter's sealed history and other secrets that must never fall into enemy hands. The construction of these mental fortifications requires years of practice under the guidance of experienced librarians who have already mastered the techniques. Students learn to visualize their mental defenses as physical structures, creating detailed imaginary architecture that their subconscious minds then maintain as actual psychic barriers. Some librarians envision fortress walls surrounding their thoughts, while others prefer labyrinthine passages that confuse intruders or layered shields that absorb psychic attacks. The specific visualization matters less than the clarity and permanence of the construct, as a well-built mental fortress becomes as real within the warp as any physical structure exists in real space. Senior librarians test their students' defenses through simulated psychic attacks, probing for weaknesses and teaching techniques for reinforcing vulnerable points. Psychic defense training extends beyond passive barriers to include active countermeasures against hostile psychers and demonic entities. Storm Wardens librarians learn to recognize the signatures of different psychic attack forms, from the subtle mental intrusions that Eldar warlocks employ to the overwhelming psychic assaults favored by chaos sorcerers. Each attack type requires specific defensive responses, techniques that deflect or absorb hostile energies before they can affect the librarian's mind. Training scenarios simulate these various threats, with senior librarians launching controlled attacks that their students must identify and counter. The exercises start with simple challenges and gradually increase in complexity, eventually requiring students to defend against multiple simultaneous threats while maintaining concentration on other tasks. The development of offensive psychic capabilities proceeds alongside defensive training, though Storm Warden's doctrine emphasizes that a librarian's primary responsibility involves protecting battle brothers rather than simply adding firepower to engagements. Students begin with basic telekinetic exercises, learning to manipulate physical objects through psychic force before progressing to combat applications. Early attempts typically involve moving small items across training chambers, with students gradually increasing both the mass of objects they can affect and the precision of their control. A fully trained librarian can hurl vehicles through the air with crushing force or manipulate individual bolter rounds in flight, redirecting enemy fire away from friendly forces. Pyrokinetic disciplines allow librarians to generate and control flames through psychic power, creating attacks that immolate enemy infantry or superheat armor until it fails. This capability proves particularly effective against orcs and other enemies who rely on mass infantry assaults, as psychic fire spreads rapidly through densely packed formations. Storm Wardens librarians learn to shape their flames with precision, creating walls of fire that channel enemy movements or focus streams that burn through specific targets without affecting nearby allies. The training for pyrokinesis emphasizes control over raw power, as uncontrolled flames can easily spread beyond the librarian's ability to direct them, potentially endangering friendly forces or causing collateral damage to civilian populations. Biomantic abilities represent another discipline studied by Storm Wardens librarians, though fewer members of the librarius demonstrate aptitude for these techniques compared to telekinesis or pyrokinesis. Biomancy allows psychers to manipulate biological processes, accelerating healing, enhancing physical capabilities, or weakening enemies through psychic attack. Librarians skilled in biomancy can knit broken bones within minutes, purge toxins from wounded battle brothers, or strengthen muscles beyond even Space Marine norms for brief periods. In offensive applications, biomantic attacks disrupt enemy nervous systems, causing paralysis or uncontrollable spasms that leave targets helpless. The ethical implications of biomancy receive extensive discussion during training, as the power to heal can easily become the power to harm in ways that some consider more disturbing than simple destruction through fire or force. Telepathic training focuses heavily on communication applications rather than the mental domination techniques that some psychers employ. Storm Wardens librarians learn to establish psychic links with multiple recipients simultaneously, creating communication networks that function regardless of electronic jamming or environmental interference. These networks allow squad leaders to coordinate actions with perfect clarity, as telepathic communication transmits complete thoughts rather than requiring verbal description of complex tactical situations. Advanced students practice maintaining telepathic contact while simultaneously engaging in physical combat, developing the mental discipline necessary to multitask effectively during chaotic battlefield conditions. The most dangerous aspect of librarian training involves controlled exposure to demonic presence under circumstances designed to teach recognition and resistance without risking actual possession. The Storm Wardens maintain sealed chambers within their librarious tower, where minor warp entities remain bound through ancient wards and constant psychic suppression. Senior librarians bring students into these chambers in small groups, allowing them to observe demonic manifestations while protected by multiple layers of psychic shielding. The experience proves deeply unsettling even for Space Marines, as demons represent violations of natural law that trigger instinctive revulsion in unaugmented humans and enhanced warriors alike. Students learn to overcome this instinctive fear through repeated exposure, developing the mental fortitude necessary to face greater demonic threats during actual combat operations. Epistolaries and senior codicers bear responsibility for maintaining the memory seals that protect the Storm Warden's forgotten history from unauthorized access or accidental discovery. These seals exist as both physical wards inscribed throughout the Vault of Remembrance and psychic constructs woven into the minds of battle brothers who might inadvertently learn fragments of sealed information. The physical wards require regular renewal through rituals conducted by multiple librarians working in concert, channeling psychic energy into the inscribed patterns that form the foundation of the protective barriers. These rituals follow precise formulas developed over centuries, with each librarian contributing specific elements to the overall ward structure. Any deviation from the established patterns risks weakening the seals or creating gaps that psychic intrusion might exploit. The psychic seals embedded within Battle Brothers' minds represent more sophisticated applications of the same principles used to construct personal mental fortifications. When circumstances require that a warrior learn information related to the chapter's sealed past, librarians immediately implement memory seals that isolate the new knowledge within protected mental compartments. These compartments function as psychic vaults within the individual's consciousness, accessible only under specific conditions and protected by triggers that would destroy the sealed memories if someone attempted unauthorized access. The process of implementing such seals requires multiple librarians working together, as the complexity of the psychic structures involved exceeds what any single psyker can safely construct. Chief librarians throughout the Storm Warden's history have carried the heaviest burden of any position within the chapter, as they alone maintain unrestricted access to the complete truth of the chapter's founding and the events that necessitated the Great Forgetting. Each chief librarian inherits this knowledge upon assuming his position, undergoing a ritual transfer of memories from his predecessor that takes days to complete and leaves both participants mentally exhausted. The incoming chief librarian experiences the sealed history as though he had lived through those events himself, gaining understanding that goes beyond simple factual knowledge to include the emotional context and strategic considerations that drove the decision to erase the chapter's collective memory. The psychological impact of bearing this knowledge tests even the formidable mental discipline of Space Marine librarians. Chief librarians must maintain absolute secrecy about information that contextualizes everything the chapter does, while simultaneously providing guidance to battle brothers who lack that context. They make decisions knowing factors that they cannot explain to those who must execute their orders, trusting in the loyalty and discipline of their brothers to follow commands whose full justification remains hidden. This burden has driven some chief librarians to seek isolation within the deepest meditation chambers of the librarious tower, spending weeks in solitary contemplation as they process the weight of their knowledge and its implications for the chapter's future. Notable librarians throughout the Storm Wardens' recorded history have shaped the chapter's development through their contributions to both combat operations and internal security protocols. Chief Librarian Sacris served during the 38th millennium, developing many of the mental fortification techniques still taught to contemporary students. His innovations in psychic defense came through practical necessity, as the Storm Wardens faced repeated incursions by chaos forces whose sorcerers proved capable of breaking through the mental barriers previously employed by the librarius. Sacris conducted extensive research into the mechanisms of psychic attack, studying captured texts on demonic summoning and interviewing inquisitors who specialized in combating chaos psykers. His work resulted in the layered defense system that contemporary Storm Wardens librarians use, techniques that proved their effectiveness during subsequent engagements against Thousand Suns warbands and other psychically capable enemies. Epistolary Kyrios distinguished himself during the Margin Crusade in the 40th millennium, providing psychic support that proved decisive during multiple critical engagements. His ability to maintain telepathic contact with all elements of a dispersed Storm Wardens force allowed unprecedented coordination during complex operations across multiple star systems. Kyrios developed techniques for amplifying his telepathic range through resonance with other librarians, creating psychic relay networks that extended communication capabilities across distances that would normally exceed any individual psyker's reach. These techniques became standard practice within the Storm Wardens librarius, incorporated into training programs, and employed during subsequent campaigns requiring coordination across extended operational theaters. Codiceer Thuron earned recognition for his contributions to anti-demon protocols following a disastrous engagement where warp entities nearly overwhelmed a Storm Warden strike force. Thuron survived the battle despite suffering severe psychic trauma, his mental defenses barely holding against sustained demonic assault. His recovery required months of intensive treatment by senior librarians, during which he provided detailed accounts of the psychic techniques the demons employed and the weaknesses he identified in Storm Warden's defensive doctrine. Thuron's insights led to significant revisions in how the chapter prepared for anti-demon operations, including the development of new blessing rituals and modifications to the psychic wards that librarians project around friendly forces during engagements with warp entities. The internal security protocols maintained by the librarius extend beyond protecting sealed knowledge to include monitoring the chapter for signs of chaos corruption or other threats that might compromise Storm Warden's integrity. Librarians conduct regular psychic examinations of all battle brothers, subtle scans that check for the distinctive signatures indicating warp taint or demonic influence. These examinations occur without the subject's awareness in most cases, as librarians probe surface thoughts during routine interactions, rather than conducting formal interrogations that might create resentment or suspicion. Battle brothers who display anomalous psychic signatures receive more thorough examination, with senior librarians conducting deep scans that explore every aspect of the individual's mental state and recent experiences. When corruption is detected, the librarius follows established protocols that prioritize containment over all other considerations. The affected battle brother faces immediate isolation within specially prepared chambers lined with psychic dampening materials and inscribed with binding wards. Multiple librarians work to determine the extent of corruption and whether it can be purged without destroying the individual's mind entirely. In cases where purging proves impossible, the chief librarian makes the final decision regarding the corrupted warrior's fate, weighing the value of preserving a battle brother's life against the risk that corruption might spread to others. These decisions represent some of the most difficult any chief librarian must make, as they involve condemning brothers who may have served the chapter with distinction for decades or even centuries. The librarius maintains detailed records of every psychic phenomenon observed by Storm Warden's forces, creating an institutional knowledge base that informs responses to new threats and improves understanding of warp-related dangers. These records include descriptions of demonic entities encountered during various engagements, analysis of psychic attack techniques employed by enemy psychers, and documentation of unusual warp phenomena observed in different regions of space. Librarians study these records as part of their training, learning to recognize threat signatures and understand the tactical implications of different psychic manifestations. The accumulated knowledge represents centuries of hard-won experience, with each entry purchased through battles where Storm Wardens faced enemies wielding powers that conventional forces cannot effectively counter. Research into psychic phenomena continues within the Librarius Tower, with senior librarians conducting experiments designed to expand understanding of warp energies and develop new applications for psychic power. These experiments proceed under strictly controlled conditions, with multiple safeguards in place to prevent accidents that could endanger the fortress monastery or its inhabitants. Librarians test new techniques for psychic defense, explore variations on established offensive disciplines, and investigate theoretical applications that might provide tactical advantages during future operations. The chief librarian personally approves all research proposals, ensuring that experiments remain within acceptable risk parameters and serve legitimate purposes rather than satisfying simple curiosity about forbidden subjects. The relationship between the librarius and other elements of the chapter reflects mutual respect tempered by healthy wariness regarding psychic power and its dangers. Battle Brothers appreciate the capabilities that librarians bring to combat operations, while maintaining awareness that psychers represent potential vulnerabilities if their powers spiral beyond control. This attitude encourages librarians to demonstrate constant vigilance regarding their own mental state and to accept oversight from the chaplains who monitor all Battle Brothers for signs of corruption. The chaplains and librarians work closely together despite their different specializations, recognizing that spiritual fortitude and psychic discipline both contribute to protecting the chapter from chaos influence. The Storm Wardens maintain extensive arsenals across their fleet and within the Eyrie, stockpiles of weapons and equipment that reflect both standard Adeptus Astartes patterns and specialized wargear developed specifically for the chapter's operational requirements. The chapter's armories house thousands of bolters, hundreds of suits of power armor in various marks, scores of vehicles ranging from rhino transports to land raider assault tanks, and countless other pieces of military hardware necessary to sustain combat operations across multiple theaters simultaneously. The Master of the Arsenal oversees these stockpiles, working closely with the chapter's tech marines to ensure that every piece of equipment receives proper maintenance and that Battle Brothers have access to whatever tools their missions require. Standard bolters form the backbone of Storm Wardens' infantry firepower, with the chapter maintaining sufficient stocks to equip every Battle Brother with these reliable weapons. The Storm Wardens favor the Godwin pattern bolt gun manufactured by the Forge Worlds of the Calixis sector, finding these weapons particularly well suited to the close-quarters combat that characterizes much of the chapter's operations. Each bolter undergoes rigorous testing before issue, with tech marines firing hundreds of rounds through every weapon to verify function and accuracy. Battle Brothers develop personal relationships with their assigned bolters, maintaining these weapons with meticulous care and making minor adjustments to sights, grips, and trigger mechanisms to suit individual preferences. Some veterans carry bolters that have served the chapter for centuries, their metal surfaces worn smooth by generations of hands, but their mechanisms still functioning with absolute reliability. Power armor represents the most critical piece of equipment any Space Marine possesses. The ceramite plates and integrated systems transforming already superhuman warriors into walking tanks capable of surviving conditions that would kill unprotected Astartes within seconds. The Storm Wardens maintain suits in marks ranging from ancient Mark VI Corvus patterns salvaged from battlefield centuries ago to more recent Mark VIII errant suits that incorporate the latest technological refinements. Each suit requires constant attention from tech marines and their servitor assistants, as the complex systems that regulate temperature, filter air, monitor vital signs, and provide tactical data demand regular calibration and component replacement. Battle Brothers spend hours in the armoring chambers before deployments, standing motionless while Tech Marines and their helpers attach each plate, test each seal, and verify that all systems function within acceptable parameters. The black and silver livery that distinguishes Storm Wardens' armor serves both practical and symbolic purposes. The black provides effective camouflage during void operations and in the shadowed environments where much of the chapter's combat occurs, while the silver trim and chapter symbol ensure that allies can identify Storm Wardens' forces even in chaotic battlefield conditions. Each Battle Brothers armor displays his squad designation, company marking, and personal heraldry earned through notable deeds. Veterans who have served with distinction for decades carry armor covered in campaign badges, purity seals, and honor markings that tell the story of their service in visual form. The Tech Marines maintain detailed records of every suit's history, tracking which Battle Brothers have worn each set of armor, and documenting the battles where particular suits sustained damage or their wearers performed exceptional feats. Storm shields represent one of the Storm Wardens' most distinctive pieces of equipment, with the chapter maintaining larger stockpiles of these defensive tools than most other chapters of comparable size. These energy shields project protective fields capable of deflecting or absorbing tremendous kinetic and energy weapon impacts, allowing warriors to advance under fire that would pin down or destroy unshielded forces. The Storm Wardens employ storm shields extensively during boarding actions, with shield-bearing warriors forming the vanguard that breaches enemy vessels and clears initial resistance. The shields prove equally valuable during planetary assaults, protecting squads as they advance across open ground toward enemy positions. Tech Marines configure each shield's power field to match the wielder's combat style, adjusting field strength, coverage area, and energy consumption rates based on whether the bearer fights primarily in close combat or uses the shield mainly for protection while advancing. Thunder hammers and power fists provide the Storm Wardens with close combat weapons capable of destroying the heaviest enemy units through sheer kinetic force amplified by disruption fields. These weapons crush armor, pulverize bone, and shatter vehicles with impacts that generate localized seismic shocks. The chapter's First Company veterans favor thunder hammers paired with storm shields, a combination that allows them to advance through enemy fire and deliver devastating strikes against priority targets. Each thunder hammer bears the names of previous wielders inscribed along its haft, creating lineages that connect current bearers to warriors who carried the same weapons centuries earlier. Power fists offer similar destructive capability in more compact forms, with many squad sergeants and veteran warriors choosing these weapons for situations where thunder hammer's size and weight would prove disadvantageous. Power swords and chainswords serve Battle Brothers who prefer faster, more precise close combat techniques to the overwhelming force of thunder hammers. Power swords generate disruption fields along their blades that allow them to cut through armor and force fields that would resist normal edged weapons, while chainswords tear through flesh and lighter armor through rapid rotation of monomolecular edged teeth. The Storm Wardens maintain extensive training facilities where Battle Brothers practice swordsmanship, developing skills that transform these weapons into extensions of their own bodies. Master-crafted power swords passed down through generations receive special reverence, their blades inscribed with the names of notable warriors who wielded them and the enemies they slew. Some of these weapons date back to the chapter's earliest recorded campaigns, their origins lost in the forgotten centuries, but their effectiveness proven through millennia of service. Specialized ammunition types augment the Storm Warden's combat effectiveness against specific enemy categories, with the chapter maintaining stockpiles of rounds designed to defeat armor, destroy vehicles, or eliminate particular Xeno species. Kraken pattern penetrator rounds punch through heavy armor that would stop standard bolter ammunition, their adamantine cores retaining lethal velocity even after passing through multiple layers of ceramite or plasteel. Hellfire rounds carry mutagenic acids that prove particularly effective against tyrannid organisms and other biological targets, the acids eating through chitin and flesh with horrifying speed. Dragon firebolts generate thermal blooms on impact that incinerate infantry in cover, while metal storm fléchette rounds transform bolters into devastating anti-personnel weapons that shred unarmored targets across wide areas. The chapter's Techmarines work constantly to maintain and improve the Storm Wardens' equipment, conducting repairs, performing routine maintenance, and implementing modifications that enhance weapon performance or adapt gear for specific mission requirements. These warriors undergo training on Mars with the Adeptus Mechanicus, learning the sacred rituals and technical procedures necessary to maintain the complex machinery that Space Marine chapters depend upon. Storm Wardens' Techmarines typically spend decades on Mars, studying under Mechanicus adepts who teach them to commune with machine spirits, diagnose mechanical problems, and perform the delicate work of repairing or modifying equipment that lesser tech priests cannot touch. When they return to the chapter, Techmarines bring knowledge of the latest Mechanicus innovations alongside traditional techniques passed down since the Great Crusade. The relationship between the Storm Wardens and the Adeptus Mechanicus remains cordial and mutually beneficial, though not without occasional tensions that arise from the different priorities each organization maintains. The Mechanicus Forge worlds of the Calixis sector provide the chapter with vehicles, ammunition, and replacement parts necessary to sustain operations, while the Storm Wardens offer military protection for Mechanicus installations and occasionally recover Archaeotech or SDC fragments that the Mechanicus prizes above almost all other considerations. Techmarines serve as intermediaries between these organizations, translating between the religious terminology the Mechanicus employs and the practical military language Storm Wardens officers prefer. When disagreements arise regarding equipment specifications or delivery schedules, Techmarines negotiate compromises that satisfy both parties while ensuring the chapter's operational requirements receive priority. Sacred relics within the Storm Warden's possession represent the chapter's most precious artifacts, items whose histories and capabilities set them apart from standard equipment. Unlike chapters with unbroken records stretching back to their founding, the Storm Wardens possess relatively few relics from their earliest years, as most such items either were lost during the events that preceded the memory erasure, or their significance was forgotten along with the memories that gave them context. The relics the chapter does maintain come primarily from campaigns conducted after the Great Forgetting, artifacts recovered from battlefields or gifted by allies whose provenance can be verified through existing records. Each relic resides in the Reclusiam when not deployed for battle, displayed in honored positions where battle brothers can view them during ceremonies and draw inspiration from the deeds they represent. The Stormcaller represents one of the chapter's most venerated weapons, a master-crafted thunder hammer that has served First Company warriors for over 2,000 years. The weapon's head bears intricate engravings depicting lightning strikes and storm clouds, while its haft contains power field generators of exceptional quality that produce disruption fields stronger than standard patterns. The Stormcaller earned its name during a boarding action against a Chaos cruiser, where the warrior wielding it struck the enemy vessel's plasma reactor containment with such force that the resulting explosion destroyed the entire ship. Subsequent bearers have added to the weapon's legend through their own accomplishments, and the current chapter champion carries the Stormcaller into battle when facing the most dangerous enemies. Techmarines maintain the Thunder Hammer with obsessive care, replacing worn components with parts manufactured to the exact specifications of the originals, and conducting blessing rituals before and after every deployment. The Aegis Eternal stands as the chapter's most ancient suit of Terminator armor, its origins predating the memory erasure by an unknown margin. The armor systems function flawlessly despite their age, incorporating technologies that contemporary Techmarines struggle to fully understand. The Aegis Eternal provides its wearer with enhanced protection beyond even standard Terminator plate, its void shields absorbing damage that would cripple lesser suits. Inscriptions in High Gothic cover every surface, prayers, and wards that chaplains believe contribute to the armor's exceptional durability. The suit has survived battles that destroyed other Terminators completely, protecting its wearers through situations that should have resulted in their deaths. Only the most veteran warriors receive permission to don the Aegis Eternal, and those who wear it report feeling connected to previous bearers, as though the armor itself carries memories of the warriors who fought and died within its ceramite shell. The Blade of Sacris serves as the chapter master's personal weapon, a power sword of exceptional craftsmanship whose origins trace back to the chapter's earliest days on their home world. The blade was supposedly forged from metals mined deep within Mount Scathar, materials that Techmarines claim possess unusual properties that enhance the weapon's power field generation. Every chapter master since the blade's creation has carried it into battle, and its edge has tasted the blood of Chaos champions, Orc warbosses, and Xenos leaders across dozens of campaigns. The sword's hilt contains a small reliquary holding fragments of bone from fallen chapter masters, connecting each new bearer to his predecessors through physical remains. When a chapter master falls in battle, his successor adds a new fragment to the reliquary during his investiture ceremony, maintaining the chain of leadership that links the current chapter master to all who came before. Storm Wardens librarians employ force weapons that channel psychic energy through physical blades or staves, creating weapons that can harm demonic entities and psychically active enemies that conventional arms cannot reliably damage. Each force weapon receives extensive consecration by both Techmarines and chaplains, the rituals binding the weapon's physical form to psychic circuitry that allows it to serve as a focus for the wielder's power. The most potent force weapons in the chapter's possession date back centuries, their psychic matrices refined through generations of use until they respond to their bearer's thoughts with minimal conscious effort. These weapons carry names like Mindbreaker, Soulcleaver, and Warpbane, titles earned through the entities they have banished and the psychers they have slain. Junior librarians receive newly crafted force weapons upon completing their training, but many aspire to eventually inherit one of the ancient blades whose history spans centuries of service. Sanctified ammunition represents a critical component of the Storm Warden's capability to combat demonic threats, bolter rounds and other projectiles blessed through rituals that infuse them with energy's anathema to warp entities. The process of sanctification involves both Techmarines and chaplains working in concert, with Techmarines preparing the ammunition according to precise specifications, while chaplains conduct blessing ceremonies that call upon the Emperor's protection. The exact nature of these blessings remains secret outside the chaplaincy and senior librarians, though Battle Brothers report that sanctified rounds impact demon flesh with effects far exceeding their physical characteristics. Demons struck by blessed ammunition suffer wounds that refuse to heal through normal warp-based regeneration, the holy energies disrupting the connection between the entity's manifestation and the Imperium that sustains it. The chapter maintains dedicated facilities for producing sanctified ammunition, chambers deep within the Eyrie where chaplains and Techmarines work under conditions of ritual purity. These facilities operate continuously, producing stocks of blessed rounds that the chapter stores in specially prepared magazines marked with purity seals and protective wards. Before deployments against known or suspected chaos forces, squads draw sanctified ammunition from these reserves, replacing their standard loadouts with rounds specifically prepared for combating demonic entities. The process of sanctification limits production rates, as each batch requires individual blessing ceremonies that cannot be rushed without compromising the ammunition's effectiveness. This constraint means the Storm Wardens must carefully manage their sanctified ammunition reserves, ensuring sufficient stocks remain available for emergencies, while not hoarding so much that production capacity sits idle. Psychically attuned wargear extends beyond force weapons to include various items that enhance librarians' capabilities or provide protection against psychic attack. Psychic hoods worn by Storm Wardens librarians incorporate sophisticated systems that amplify the wearer's mental defenses while projecting protective fields that shield nearby battle brothers from hostile psychic influence. These devices contain psychically reactive crystals that resonate with the librarian's own mental energies, creating feedback loops that multiply his natural psychic strength. The crystals require periodic replacement as they gradually degrade from sustained exposure to warp energies, with Techmarines maintaining careful schedules that ensure no librarian deploys with compromised equipment. Some psychic hoods incorporate additional features, such as auto-targeting systems that track psychic signatures or communication enhancers that extend the range of telepathic contact. Rosarius force fields protect chaplains and some senior officers, generating protective barriers similar to those produced by storm shields, but without requiring the bearer to carry physical shield generators. These compact devices create spherical force fields that intercept incoming fire from any direction, providing comprehensive protection that allows the wearer to focus on combat without worrying about maintaining shield positioning. The Storm Wardens issue Rosara to chaplains as symbols of their office and to company captains who have demonstrated exceptional leadership. Each Rosarius bears the chapter's symbol and includes small reliquaries containing fragments of bone or armor from fallen heroes, physical connections to the chapter's history that remind bearers of the legacy they serve. The chapter's vehicle pool includes standard patterns common across Space Marine chapters, alongside specialized variants developed for the Storm Warden's particular operational requirements. Rhino transports provide basic mobility for tactical squads, their armored hulls protecting passengers during transit to combat zones before disgorging squads directly into battle. The Storm Wardens modify their Rhinos with additional communications equipment that allows embarked squads to maintain constant contact with company command elements, ensuring that transported forces remain integrated into overall tactical plans even while moving. Predator tanks offer mobile fire support, their auto-cannons and las-cannons engaging enemy armor and fortifications from ranges where return fire poses minimal threat. Land Raiders serve as assault transports for Terminator armored veterans, their thick armor and powerful weapons allowing them to advance through enemy fire that would destroy lesser vehicles. Dreadnoughts represent the chapter's most revered vehicles, armored sarcophagi that house the remains of critically wounded warriors too valuable to allow death's release. When a battle brother suffers injuries that would kill him but his experience and knowledge warrant preservation, the chapter's Techmarines entomb him within a dreadnought chassis, connecting his nervous system to the war machine's controls and suspending his body in amniotic fluids that sustain life indefinitely. The Storm Wardens maintain approximately a dozen active dreadnoughts, ancient warriors whose service spans centuries or even millennia. These venerable machines fight alongside their brothers during major engagements, their pilots' accumulated tactical wisdom proving as valuable as the heavy weapons their chassis mount. Between battles, dreadnoughts rest in the Reclusiam, their systems powered down to minimal levels, while their occupants sleep dreamless sleep until the chapter requires their service again. Thunderhawk gunships provide the Storm Wardens with atmospheric and orbital transport capability, heavily armed and armored craft that can deliver squads directly into combat zones or extract forces from hostile territory under fire. Each battle company maintains several Thunderhawks assigned to its permanent roster, enough to transport the entire company if necessary, though such mass deployments rarely occur. The gunships mount impressive weapon arrays including heavy bolters, las cannons, and in some cases Hellstrike missiles capable of destroying enemy armor or fortifications. Thunderhawk pilots undergo extensive training in combat insertion techniques, learning to navigate through anti-aircraft fire, perform precision landings in confined spaces, and provide close air support for ground forces. The chapter's most experienced pilots can thread Thunderhawks through urban environments at speeds that would result in crashes if attempted by lesser aviators, delivering their passengers within meters of objective points, despite enemy attempts at interdiction. Strike cruisers form the core of the Storm Warden's fleet, vessels that combine transport capacity sufficient for company-strength forces with firepower adequate to engage enemy warships or provide orbital bombardment support. Each battle company operates from a dedicated strike cruiser that serves as mobile fortress and command center during extended deployments away from Sacris. These ships mount lance batteries and macro cannons capable of crippling enemy vessels or reducing surface installations to molten craters, while their launch bays house the Thunderhawks and boarding torpedoes necessary for ship-to-ship assault operations. The crews include both chapter serfs who handle routine operations and battle brothers trained in void warfare who man weapon stations and boarding parties. Strike cruiser captains typically hold ranks as senior battle brothers or lieutenants, warriors who have demonstrated both tactical acumen and the specialized knowledge necessary to command vessels in three-dimensional void combat. Battle barges represent the Storm Wardens' most powerful warships, massive vessels that dwarf strike cruisers and mount weapons capable of engaging enemy capital ships on equal terms. The chapter maintains 2 battle barges, ancient ships whose construction dates back centuries and whose systems incorporate technologies that contemporary Forge worlds struggle to replicate. These vessels serve as flagships during major campaigns, providing command facilities for the chapter master or senior captains coordinating multi-company operations. The battle barge's armor can withstand sustained bombardment from enemy fleets, while their weapons batteries deliver firepower sufficient to cripple or destroy enemy capital ships through concentrated salvos. Launch bays running the length of each battle barge can deploy dozens of Thunderhawks simultaneously, allowing rapid insertion of multiple companies during planetary assaults. Maintenance of the chapter's fleet requires constant effort from tech marines and their servitor assistants, as void-capable vessels demand attention to thousands of systems whose failure could result in catastrophic loss of life. The Storm Wardens maintain extensive repair facilities both aboard their larger vessels and within orbital docks around Sacris, workshops where tech marines conduct everything from routine maintenance to major reconstructions of battle-damaged ships. The chapter's relationship with the Adeptus Mechanicus proves particularly valuable regarding fleet maintenance, as Forge World tech priests provide expertise and components that chapter tech marines cannot source independently. When Storm Wardens vessels require repairs beyond the chapter's organic capability, they dock at Mechanicus facilities where teams of tech priests work alongside chapter tech marines to restore the ships to full operational status. Consecration rituals conducted by chaplains and tech marines ensure that all Storm Wardens equipment receives appropriate spiritual preparation before deployment, particularly when facing chaos-corrupted enemies where the risk of demonic influence demands additional precautions. These rituals vary based on the equipment type and intended use, with weapons receiving different blessings than vehicles or armor. Chaplains recite prayers invoking the Emperor's protection while anointing equipment with sacred oils, creating spiritual barriers that complement the physical capabilities of the gear itself. Tech Marines perform their own rituals that honor the machine spirits inhabiting complex equipment, conducting ceremonies that request the spirit's cooperation and maximum performance during upcoming operations. Battle Brothers report that properly consecrated equipment functions more reliably than items that have not received appropriate spiritual preparation, though whether this results from actual divine intervention or simply from the psychological confidence proper rituals instill remains a matter of theological debate. The Storm Warden's involvement with the Death Watch stretches back centuries, a commitment that has seen dozens of Battle Brothers seconded to the Long Watch to serve alongside Space Marines from other chapters in combating Xeno's threats across the galaxy. This relationship began during the chapter's early centuries, when Inquisitors of the Ordo Xenos approached the Storm Wardens with requests for warriors to join specialized kill teams operating in the Calixis sector and surrounding regions. The chapter's leadership recognized the value of such service, both for the practical experience Battle Brothers would gain fighting diverse alien species, and for the intelligence networks that Death Watch membership provided access to. Storm Wardens selected for Death Watch service typically serve tour-lasting decades before returning to the chapter, bringing with them knowledge of Xeno's capabilities and tactics that proves invaluable during subsequent operations. The selection process for Deathwatch candidates emphasizes veterans who have demonstrated not just combat prowess, but also mental flexibility and the ability to work effectively with warriors from different chapters, whose combat doctrines and cultural traditions may differ significantly from Storm Wardens' practices. Company captains nominate candidates from their veteran squads, warriors who have shown tactical adaptability during operations against various enemy types. The chapter's librarians conduct psychic examinations of nominees to verify their mental stability and resistance to corruption, as Deathwatch service often involves exposure to Xenos artifacts and knowledge that could compromise warriors lacking sufficient fortitude. Those selected undergo additional training at the Eyrie before departing for their assigned watch stations, instruction that covers Xeno species identification, specialized anti-alien tactics, and protocols for working within the Inquisition's command structure. Iriok Watch Station served as the primary Deathwatch facility in the Jericho Reach, a massive space station positioned at the edge of Imperial-controlled space where it could monitor Xenos activity and coordinate kill team deployments across multiple sectors. The station housed hundreds of Deathwatch battle brothers from dozens of different chapters, creating a unique environment where warriors who might otherwise never meet fought alongside each other against threats ranging from orc warbands to Tyranid splinter fleets to mysterious alien species whose very existence remained classified. Storm Wardens assigned to Iriok integrated into this diverse force, their expertise in boarding actions and close quarters combat proving particularly valuable during operations requiring ship-to-ship assault or clearance of space hulks infested with alien organisms. The Achilles Crusade represented one of the Imperium's major military efforts during the late 41st millennium, a massive campaign aimed at conquering the Jericho Reach and establishing permanent Imperial control over a region that had remained largely beyond the Emperor's light for millennia. The Crusade involved millions of Imperial Guard troops, dozens of Space Marine chapters, and extensive naval assets committed to a grinding advance against entrenched Xeno civilizations and chaos-held worlds. Storm Wardens forces participated in multiple engagements throughout the Crusade, with both full companies deployed from Sacris and individual battle brothers serving with Deathwatch kill teams conducting specialized operations ahead of the main advance. The chapter's contributions earned recognition from Crusade commanders, though the costs in battle brothers killed or severely wounded mounted steadily as the campaign progressed through increasingly hostile territory. Watch Captain Artemis commanded significant respect throughout the Deathwatch, a veteran warrior whose service spanned decades and whose tactical acumen had proven decisive during numerous operations against Xenos threats. His reputation extended beyond simple combat effectiveness to encompass an almost supernatural ability to predict enemy movements and identify vulnerabilities in alien defensive positions. Artemis had served with distinction during operations against Tyranid hive fleets, Tau expeditionary forces, and various minor Xeno species whose threat to Imperial interests warranted Deathwatch intervention. Storm Wardens battle brothers who served under his command reported that Artemis possessed an intuitive understanding of Xeno's psychology that allowed him to anticipate enemy actions with uncanny accuracy, though whether this stemmed from natural talent or some other source remained unclear. The Nemesis Tesseract represented an artifact of such dangerous potential that its very existence remained classified at the highest levels of the Inquisition, known only to select members of the Ordo Xenos and the Deathwatch commanders responsible for its containment. The device originated from the Necrons, an ancient race of machine beings whose technology operated on principles that human science could barely comprehend. Imperial forces had recovered the Tesseract from a Necron tomb world during the early stages of the Achilles Crusade, recognizing it as an item of immense power, but lacking complete understanding of its purpose or capabilities. Inquisitors who examined the artifact determined that it functioned as a prison, a containment device holding something whose nature they could only speculate about. The decision to transport the Tesseract to Iriok Watch Station for study and secure storage proved to be a catastrophic miscalculation whose consequences would claim dozens of lives and nearly result in the station's complete destruction. The entity imprisoned within the Nemesis Tesseract was a Khatan shard, a fragment of one of the ancient star gods that the Necrons had long ago shattered and bound into slavery. Specifically, the shard belonged to the being known as the Deceiver, a creature whose very nature involved manipulation, illusion, and the corruption of perception itself. The Khatan had existed since before the rise of humanity, entities of such immense power that they had fed upon stars themselves before the Necrons found ways to trap and weaponize them. Even a shard, a mere fraction of the Deceiver's complete essence, possessed capabilities that made it one of the most dangerous entities in the galaxy. The Tesseract's containment systems had held for millennia Necron technology maintaining barriers that even a Khatan fragment could not breach. However, the device had never been designed to withstand the kind of intensive examination and testing that inquisitorial tech priests and Deathwatch tech marines subjected it to once it arrived at Iriok. The circumstances surrounding the Tesseract's opening remain subject to conflicting accounts and deliberate information suppression by surviving inquisitors who witnessed the events. What is known with certainty is that research teams studying the artifact detected what they interpreted as fluctuations in its containment field, variations that suggested the possibility of accessing whatever lay within without triggering complete containment failure. The decision to attempt opening the Tesseract came from senior inquisitors who believed the potential intelligence value justified the risks, though subsequent investigations suggested that the Deceiver itself may have influenced these decisions through subtle manipulation of perceptions and judgments. The actual opening occurred in a heavily shielded research chamber deep within Iriok's core sections, with multiple layers of security and containment protocols theoretically sufficient to handle any threat that might emerge. The Deceiver's escape from the Tesseract occurred with horrifying speed, the entity manifesting in real space and immediately beginning to manipulate reality in ways that violated every natural law. Witnesses who survived described impossible geometries, time flowing backwards or stopping entirely in localized areas, and perceptions that shifted between multiple contradictory states simultaneously. The Khatan shard possessed the ability to project illusions so convincing that they became functionally real, creating false images that could kill as effectively as physical weapons. It could appear in multiple locations simultaneously, each manifestation solid and capable of independent action. The entity's very presence warped the minds of those who perceived it directly, driving some observers immediately insane while filling others with certainty that the creature posed no threat at all despite the carnage unfolding around them. Deathwatch kill teams responded to the containment breach within minutes, battle brothers from a dozen different chapters converging on the research section where the Deceiver had manifested. These warriors represented some of the most experienced Xenos fighters in the Imperium, veterans who had faced Tyranid Bio-Titans, Orc warbosses, and Eldar Phoenix Lords without flinching. They brought specialized weapons designed to combat the most dangerous alien threats, including conversion beamers, graviton guns, and sanctified ammunition blessed specifically for use against entities that existed partially outside normal reality. The initial assault teams entered the compromised sections expecting to face a containable threat, something that could be destroyed or driven back through application of sufficient firepower and tactical coordination. What they encountered instead was an entity that treated their weapons as inconveniences and their tactics as transparent exercises that it countered before they could even be implemented. Storm Wardens' battle brothers formed significant portions of several kill teams that engaged the Deceiver during the early stages of the containment effort. These warriors brought their chapter's expertise in close-quarters combat and their natural resistance to psychic influence, capabilities that proved marginally more effective than standard approaches against an enemy that manipulated perception and reality itself. The Storm Wardens' mental fortitude allowed them to resist some of the Deceiver's illusions, maintaining combat effectiveness when warriors from other chapters found themselves attacking phantoms or freezing in place as their minds struggled to process contradictory sensory input. However, even this enhanced resistance provided only limited protection against a Khatan shard's capabilities, and Storm Wardens' casualties mounted alongside those from other chapters, as the entity carved through Deathwatch forces with contemptuous ease. Watch Captain Artemis assumed tactical command of the containment operation as senior Deathwatch officers fell to the Deceiver's attacks or succumbed to the entity's reality-warping influence. His experience and tactical brilliance proved essential during the chaotic hours following the initial breach, as he coordinated multiple kill teams attempting to contain the Khatan shard within progressively smaller sections of the station. Artemis recognized that conventional combat could not destroy or even significantly harm the entity, and that attempts to do so simply wasted lives without achieving meaningful results. Instead, he developed a strategy focused on limiting the Deceiver's mobility and buying time for tech priests and inquisitors to devise some method of recontaining the entity within the Tesseract or similar prison. This approach required kill teams to establish defensive positions that channeled the Khatan shard's movements while avoiding direct confrontation whenever possible, tactics that went against every instinct that drove Space Marines to close with enemies and destroy them in direct combat. The Storm Wardens' contingent serving under Artemis executed his orders with the discipline their chapter's training instilled, maintaining positions even when the Deceiver manifested before them, projecting images of their fallen brothers, or creating illusions showing the futility of resistance. These warriors held corridors and junction points that allowed other kill teams to fall back in relatively good order, providing covering fire and accepting casualties to preserve the overall defensive structure that Artemis was constructing. Several Storm Wardens' battle brothers died during these holding actions, their last moments spent firing bolters at an entity that their weapons could barely affect, while their brothers retreated to secondary positions. The chapter's librarians attached to various kill teams attempted to counter the Deceiver's reality manipulation through psychic intervention, though their efforts met with limited success against a being whose existence predated the current structure of the Materium and Immaterium. The final confrontation occurred when Artemis determined that the only way to stop the Deceiver involved trapping it within a section of the station that could then be jettisoned into the void and destroyed through concentrated fire from Iriok's defensive weapons. This plan required luring the Khatan shard into the designated area and then sealing blast doors fast enough to prevent its escape, a task complicated by the entity's ability to perceive potential futures and its demonstrated capacity to be in multiple places simultaneously. Artemis led a force composed primarily of Storm Wardens and other chapters' veterans in a desperate assault designed to drive the Deceiver toward the trap, accepting that many of the warriors involved would not survive the operation. The Storm Wardens' battle brothers who volunteered for this mission understood they were essentially sacrificing themselves to save the station and prevent the Khatan shard from escaping into the wider Imperium, where its capacity for destruction and manipulation would threaten entire sectors. The assault proceeded with brutal intensity as kill teams advanced through corridors where reality itself had become unreliable, their armor's auto-senses providing readings that contradicted what their enhanced vision showed them. Storm Wardens' warriors maintained cohesion through discipline and mutual support, squad members keeping physical contact with each other to verify that what they perceived actually existed rather than representing another of the Deceiver's illusions. The Khatan shard responded to this coordinated push with increased aggression, manifesting in multiple locations simultaneously to attack from unexpected angles. Battle brothers died when the entity's touch reduced them to constituent atoms, or when its reality manipulation caused their armor to fuse with surrounding bulkheads, trapping them in place where they suffocated as their life support systems failed. Artemis personally led the final push that drove the Deceiver into the designated containment zone. The watch captain wielding master crafted weapons and wearing armor that incorporated technologies from a dozen different Forge worlds. Storm Wardens' battle brothers fought alongside him, their storm shields absorbing strikes that would have killed unprotected warriors, while they delivered return blows with power weapons and sanctified ammunition. The entity recognized the trap too late, its attention focused on destroying the warriors before it, rather than analyzing the tactical situation that was developing. When the last kill team member cleared the threshold, Artemis triggered the blast door closure sequence manually, knowing that the station's automated systems had been compromised by the deceiver's reality manipulation. The massive armored doors slammed shut with the watch captain still inside the containment zone, his final transmission consisting of a simple confirmation that the trap had succeeded. The section of Iriok containing the trapped Khatan shard was jettisoned moments later, explosive bolts severing the connections that held it to the main station structure. Defensive batteries opened fire immediately, lance strikes and macro cannon rounds reducing the separated section to debris that scattered across surrounding space. Whether this barrage actually destroyed the deceiver or simply disrupted its manifestation sufficiently to force it back into whatever dimension Khatan occupied between physical appearances remains unknown. No trace of Artemis or the dozen battle brothers who had been sealed in the containment zone with him was ever recovered, their sacrifice commemorated in the Death Watch's records and in the halls of their respective chapters. The Storm Wardens lost 8 battle brothers during the Nemesis incident, warriors whose experience and capabilities represented irreplaceable assets to the chapter. These deaths occurred across multiple engagements throughout the containment operation, from the initial response to the final trap that ended the immediate threat. Each fallen warrior had served the chapter for decades before their secondment to the Death Watch, veterans whose knowledge and tactical expertise would have benefited the Storm Wardens for centuries more had they survived. The chapter conducted memorial services at the Eyrie when news of the incident reached Sacris, chaplains leading ceremonies that honored the fallen while acknowledging that the full circumstances of their deaths remained classified beyond what even the Storm Wardens' leadership could access. The librarians conducted their own private rituals, attempting through psychic means to verify that the fallen warriors' souls had not been consumed or corrupted by the entity they had fought, though the results of these investigations provided no definitive answers. The impact on chapter morale following the Nemesis incident manifested in ways that surprised the Storm Wardens' leadership. Rather than demoralizing the battle brothers, the sacrifice of their brothers serving with the Death Watch reinforced the chapter's commitment to combating Xeno's threats regardless of cost. Warriors who had served alongside the fallen spoke of their brothers' final stands with pride rather than grief, emphasizing how Storm Wardens' discipline and training had allowed them to maintain effectiveness against an enemy that had broken warriors from other chapters. The incident became part of the chapter's oral traditions, stories passed from veterans to newly elevated battle brothers that illustrated the importance of mental fortitude and tactical discipline when facing enemies whose capabilities exceeded anything conventional warfare prepared warriors for. The tactical lessons extracted from the Nemesis incident influenced Storm Wardens' doctrine regarding containment of artifacts and entities whose nature remained poorly understood. The chapter's leadership implemented new protocols requiring extensive psychic examination of any recovered Xeno's artifacts before allowing detailed study, with librarians specifically trained to detect signs of sentient presence or reality manipulation that might indicate dangers beyond simple technological threat. Storm Wardens' battle brothers received additional instruction in recognizing and resisting perception manipulation, training that built upon their natural psychic resistance through exposure to controlled illusions and reality distortions created by the chapter's librarians. These preparations aimed to ensure that if Storm Wardens' forces encountered similar threats in the future, they would possess better tools for maintaining combat effectiveness despite facing enemies that violated natural laws. The relationship between Deathwatch service and the Storm Wardens' internal security concerns created complications that the chapter's leadership navigated with careful attention to maintaining both their commitment to the Long Watch and their need to protect classified information. Battle Brothers selected for Deathwatch service underwent additional psychic conditioning before departing for their assignments, librarians implementing memory seals similar to those protecting the chapter's forgotten history. These seals prevented Deathwatch Inquisitors or other organizations from accessing Storm Wardens' secrets through psychic interrogation or other means, while still allowing the Battle Brothers to function effectively in their assigned roles. The conditioning proved sophisticated enough that most recipients remained unaware of its existence, experiencing only vague discomfort if questioning touched on protected subjects rather than obvious mental blocks that might raise suspicions. Storm Wardens who completed Deathwatch service and returned to the chapter brought valuable intelligence about Xeno's capabilities and Imperial operations beyond the Calixis sector. The Librarius debriefed these returning warriors extensively, extracting information about alien species, enemy tactics, and technological capabilities that the chapter incorporated into its tactical databases. Some returning Battle Brothers reported encountering hints about the Storm Wardens' origins or sealed history during their service, fragments of information mentioned by Inquisitors or discovered in classified documents. The Librarius treated such reports seriously, implementing additional memory seals when necessary to prevent knowledge of the chapters passed from spreading beyond the carefully controlled circle of senior officers who already possessed such information. This constant vigilance regarding information security created additional work for the librarians, but proved essential to maintaining the barriers protecting the chapter's deepest secrets. The Storm Wardens maintained their commitment to providing Battle Brothers for Deathwatch service despite the losses suffered during the Nemesis incident and other operations, recognizing that the benefits of such service outweighed the risks. The chapter's reputation within the Deathwatch grew over centuries of reliable service, with Storm Wardens warriors known for their discipline, mental fortitude, and effectiveness during operations requiring close-quarters combat expertise. Watch captains commanding kill teams specifically requested Storm Wardens' Battle Brothers when facing threats that involved confined spaces, boarding actions, or enemies employing psychic attacks. This reputation brought honor to the chapter while providing opportunities for individual warriors to distinguish themselves through service that few Space Marines ever experienced. The Storm Wardens' operational history spans millennia of constant warfare across the Calixis sector and beyond. Their battle honors accumulated through countless engagements against every major threat the Imperium faces. Without complete records of their earliest campaigns due to the memory erasure, the chapter's documented military history begins several centuries after their founding, when record-keeping systems had been re-established and the chapter had fully integrated into Imperial defensive networks. These records detail a pattern of aggressive, decisive operations that leverage the Storm Wardens' expertise in rapid deployment and close-quarters combat to achieve objectives that conventional forces struggle to accomplish. The Margin Crusade during the 40th millennium represented one of the Storm Wardens' most significant extended campaigns, a decades-long military operation aimed at reclaiming a cluster of systems along the Calixis sector's border that had fallen to chaos corruption. The crusade involved multiple Imperial Guard regiments, elements from several Space Marine chapters, and extensive naval assets committed to systematically liberating worlds where heretical cults had overthrown legitimate Imperial governance. The Storm Wardens contributed 3 full companies to this effort, their forces operating both independently and in coordination with other Imperial elements throughout the campaign's various phases. The chapter's Battle Brothers fought in void actions against chaos-corrupted vessels, conducted planetary assaults to reclaim key worlds, and participated in extended ground campaigns that required months of sustained operations against entrenched enemy positions. The liberation of Kulth demonstrated the Storm Wardens' capability for complex multi-phase operations, requiring coordination between different unit types and supporting Imperial forces. Kulth had served as a major industrial world before its fall to chaos, its manufactorums and refineries producing equipment for Imperial Guard regiments across multiple sectors. Chaos forces recognized the world's strategic value and fortified it heavily, establishing defensive networks that included orbital platforms, surface-to-orbit weapons batteries, and ground fortifications manned by Traitor Guard regiments and Chaos Space Marines from the Word-Bearers warband that had orchestrated the world's corruption. Initial Imperial assault attempts by conventional forces failed with heavy casualties, as the defenders' prepared positions and overlapping fields of fire proved too strong for standard guard tactics to overcome. The Storm Wardens approached the Kulth operation with characteristic pragmatism, analyzing the failed assault attempts to identify weaknesses in the enemy defensive scheme. Company Captain Theodosius, commanding the Storm Wardens contingent, recognized that the orbital defenses represented the critical vulnerability in the Chaos Forces' position. While these platforms prevented Imperial Navy vessels from achieving orbital superiority necessary for sustained bombardment or large-scale troop insertions, they also concentrated significant enemy resources in locations that could be attacked through boarding actions rather than requiring frontal assaults against prepared ground positions. Theodosius proposed a plan involving simultaneous boarding assaults against multiple orbital platforms, operations that would leverage Storm Wardens' expertise while allowing Guard forces to exploit the confusion created by the space-based attacks. The assault on Kulth's orbital defenses commenced with drop pod insertions that placed Storm Warden squads directly onto platform surfaces, bypassing void shields designed to protect against ship-based weapons fire, but ineffective against small craft and drop pods approaching from unexpected vectors. The Battle Brothers breached platform hulls using melta charges and thunder hammers, forcing entry into corridors and compartments where the defenders' numerical advantages became irrelevant against Space Marine close-quarters combat capabilities. Storm Warden squads advanced through platform interiors in coordinated pushes, clearing sections methodically, while Devastator teams provided covering fire and eliminated enemy strongpoints with las cannon and missile launcher strikes. The chapter's librarians proved essential during these operations, their psychic abilities detecting ambushes that Chaos forces had prepared and countering the sorcerous powers that Word-Bearers champions attempted to employ against the attackers. The platforms fell within 18 hours of the initial assault, Storm Wardens forces systematically eliminating resistance despite fanatical defense by Chaos cultists and Traitor Guard who understood that capture meant execution. The Word-Bearers contingent defending the primary command platform fought with particular determination, their Chaos Space Marines matching Storm Wardens' Battle Brothers in close combat until sheer numbers and tactical coordination allowed the Loyalists to overwhelm them. Captain Theodosius personally slew the Word-Bearers champion leading the defense, their duel in the platform's command center witnessed by Battle Brothers from both sides as the two warriors exchanged blows that would have killed lesser opponents instantly. The Chaos champion fell when Theodosius drove his power sword through a gap in the traitor's corrupted armor, the blessed blade disrupting the demonic energies, sustaining the Word-Bearers' enhanced capabilities. With orbital supremacy achieved, Imperial forces launched the main planetary assault against Kulth's surface positions. Storm Wardens companies spearheaded the initial landings, drop pods delivering Battle Brothers directly into the heart of enemy defensive networks, while Guard regiments conducted more conventional insertions at secured landing zones. The ground campaign lasted 3 months, as Chaos forces retreated into Kulth's industrial sectors, where the maze of manufactorums and processing facilities provided defensive advantages that negated Imperial numerical superiority. Storm Warden squads excelled in these urban environments, their training in confined space combat allowing them to clear structures that Guard forces would have required days or weeks to secure. The chapter's assault squads used jump packs to access upper levels of industrial towers, establishing firing positions that allowed them to suppress enemy movements while tactical squads advanced through ground-level approaches. The final battle for Kulth occurred in the planet's primary manufactorum complex, a massive facility covering hundreds of square kilometers where Chaos forces had concentrated their remaining strength for a last stand. The complex's layout created a nightmare of overlapping corridors, processing chambers, and machinery-filled spaces where conventional tactics proved nearly useless. Storm Wardens' battle brothers adapted to these conditions through squad-level initiative and constant communication, with sergeants coordinating movements through Vox networks, while librarians maintained telepathic links that allowed real-time information sharing across the entire force. The fighting devolved into hundreds of small unit actions, as squads encountered enemy resistance in locations ranging from narrow maintenance tunnels to vast assembly halls where Titans had once been constructed. The Storm Wardens suffered significant casualties during the Kulth campaign, with approximately 30 battle brothers killed and dozens more wounded seriously enough to require extended recovery periods. These losses included several veteran sergeants whose experience represented irreplaceable assets to their companies, warriors who had served for over a century before falling to enemy fire or being overwhelmed by superior numbers in isolated sections of the Manufactorum complex. The chapter's apothecaries worked constantly throughout the campaign, recovering gene seed from fallen brothers and providing emergency medical treatment to wounded warriors in conditions that would have challenged fully equipped Medicae facilities. Despite these costs, the Storm Wardens achieved their operational objectives and earned commendations from the Margin Crusade's overall commander for their decisive contributions to Kulth's liberation. The defense of Tranche demonstrated the Storm Wardens' capability for rapid response to emerging threats and their effectiveness when operating independently without supporting Imperial forces. Tranche served as a minor agri world within the Calixis sector, its population of several million producing food supplies that fed guard regiments and naval crews across multiple systems. The world possessed minimal military infrastructure beyond a small planetary defense force, as its location deep within supposedly secure Imperial space suggested minimal threat from external attack. This assessment proved catastrophically wrong when a Dark Eldar raiding force emerged from the webway and began conducting slave raids across Tranche's population centers, their lightning-fast attacks overwhelming the PDF before effective resistance could be organized. The Storm Wardens received distress signals from Tranche approximately 6 hours after the raids began, astropathic messages describing Xeno's attacks and requesting immediate military assistance. The chapter's 4th Company, commanded by Captain Lycus, was conducting training exercises in a nearby system when the calls for aid arrived. Lycus made the immediate decision to respond despite lacking detailed intelligence about enemy strength or dispositions, recognizing that every hour of delay meant additional Imperial citizens falling into Dark Eldar hands. The company's strike cruiser translated into real space at Tranche's system, edge within 12 hours of the initial distress call, its auger arrays immediately detecting multiple Xenos vessels in low orbit around the Agri world. The Dark Eldar force consisted of 3 raiding vessels and numerous smaller craft conducting shuttle operations between the ships and surface locations where they had captured civilians. The Xenos had established temporary holding facilities in several of Tranche's cities, processing captured humans for transport to Camorra, where they would face fates that made death seem merciful by comparison. Captain Lycus assessed the tactical situation and determined that conventional void combat would allow too many Dark Eldar vessels to escape through webway portals before they could be destroyed. Instead, he ordered immediate boarding actions against all 3 raiding vessels simultaneously, a high-risk approach that would commit his entire company to ship-to-ship assaults with no reserves available if operations went poorly. Storm Wardens boarding parties launched in boarding torpedoes and Thunderhawk gunships, the armored craft accelerating toward their targets while Dark Eldar vessels attempted evasive maneuvers and defensive fire. The Xenos' ship's speed and agility made them difficult targets, but Storm Wardens' pilots demonstrated skill that matched the Dark Eldar's capabilities, adjusting their approach vectors to compensate for enemy movements and maintaining lock on their designated targets despite the violent maneuvering involved. Boarding torpedoes struck home with devastating impact, their armored prows punching through Xeno's hull plating to deliver squads directly into ship interiors, where the Dark Eldar's technological advantages became less relevant against Space Marine close-quarters combat prowess. The fighting aboard the Dark Eldar vessels proceeded with brutal intensity as Storm Wardens' battle brothers advanced through corridors designed for being smaller and more agile than power-armored Space Marines. The Xenos employed hit-and-run tactics that leveraged their superior speed, striking from unexpected angles before withdrawing through passages too narrow for Storm Wardens to pursue effectively. Dark Eldar weaponry proved capable of penetrating power armor when concentrated fire caught battle brothers in exposed positions, the Xenos' splinter weapons and darklight lances delivering wounds that the chapter's apothecaries struggled to treat given the exotic nature of the injuries involved. Storm Warden squads adapted to these conditions by maintaining tight formations that limited the Dark Eldar's ability to isolate individual warriors, while assault squads used their jump packs to access different sections of the ships and attack Xeno's positions from multiple directions simultaneously. The largest Dark Eldar vessel housed a homunculus who had accompanied the raid to oversee the processing of captured slaves for transport to Camorra. This creature proved far more dangerous than the Kabbalite warriors who formed the bulk of the raiding force, its millennia of experience and mastery of fleshcraft allowing it to create biological horrors that it unleashed against the Storm Wardens' boarding parties. The homunculus had converted sections of its vessel into torture chambers and experimental laboratories where it conducted its grotesque research, environments that the Storm Wardens' battle brothers found deeply disturbing despite their mental conditioning. The creature itself fought with weapons that caused wounds no amount of Space Marine physiology could quickly heal, toxins and biological agents that attacked the gene seed organs themselves and caused cellular breakdown that spread through affected tissue like wildfire. Brother Librarian Callias led the assault team that eventually cornered the homunculus in its primary laboratory, a chamber filled with surgical equipment and specimens that represented the creature's centuries of experimentation on living subjects. The homunculus proved capable of matching even a Space Marine librarian in combat, its enhanced reflexes and pain-immune physiology allowing it to absorb wounds that would have killed normal opponents while continuing to fight with undiminished effectiveness. Callias recognized that conventional weapons would prove insufficient against such an enemy, and instead employed psychic attacks that targeted the creature's consciousness directly, bypassing its physical defenses to assault its mind with forces that even Dark Eldar fleshcraft could not protect against. The homunculus fell when Callias channeled sufficient psychic energy to literally burn out its neural pathways, the creature's enhanced body collapsing as its brain ceased functioning despite remaining physically intact. The Storm Wardens secured all 3 Dark Eldar vessels within 4 hours of the initial boarding actions, their squads systematically eliminating Xeno's resistance throughout the ships while preventing any raiders from escaping through webway portals. The chapter's Tech Marines conducted immediate assessments of the captured vessels, determining that while the Xeno's technology remained largely incomprehensible to Imperial understanding, the ships could be rigged to self-destruct in ways that would prevent their recovery by other Dark Eldar forces. Captain Lycus ordered the vessels destroyed after Storm Warden squads had evacuated captured Imperial citizens who had been held in the ship's slave pens, the explosions that consumed the Xeno's craft visible from Tranche's surface as brief stars that flared and faded in the night sky. Ground operations to eliminate remaining Dark Eldar forces on Tranche's surface proceeded simultaneously with the Void actions, Storm Warden squads deploying via Thunderhawk to assault the temporary facilities where the Xenos had been processing captured civilians. These operations required careful precision to avoid civilian casualties, as the Dark Eldar had deliberately positioned their holding facilities in densely populated areas where Imperial attacks might kill the very people they sought to rescue. Storm Warden's assault teams employed surgical strikes that neutralized Xeno's guards while minimizing collateral damage, their bolter discipline and close combat expertise allowing them to eliminate enemies in close proximity to civilians without endangering the captives. The chapter's scouts proved particularly valuable during these operations. Their reconnaissance identifying Xeno's positions and guard rotations that allowed assault teams to time their attacks for maximum effectiveness. The tranche operation concluded with minimal Storm Wardens casualties despite the intensity of the fighting, the chapter's 4th company having accomplished its objectives while suffering only 3 battle brothers killed and a dozen wounded. The rescued civilians numbered in the tens of thousands, individuals who would have faced horrific fates in Camorra had the Storm Wardens not responded so rapidly to the distress calls. The Agri-World's surviving PDF and civilian leadership expressed profound gratitude to the chapter, though Captain Lycus declined offers of formal recognition or commemoration, explaining that the Storm Wardens had simply fulfilled their duty to protect Imperial citizens from Xeno's predation. The 4th Company departed Tranche within days of securing the world, returning to their regular patrol routes, while the planet's authorities worked to rebuild the infrastructure damaged during the raids. The Hive Fleet Dagon incursion during the late 41st millennium tested the Storm Wardens against an enemy type that required fundamentally different tactical approaches than the chapter typically employed against more conventional threats. Tyranid splinter fleets had been probing the Calixis sector's borders for decades, their bioships appearing seemingly at random to conduct raids against isolated worlds before withdrawing back into the void. Hive Fleet Dagon represented a more substantial threat than these earlier probes, a splinter fleet of significant size that Imperial intelligence estimated contained enough biomass to consume multiple worlds if left unchecked. The fleet's approach vector suggested it was targeting the industrial worlds of the Marking Marches, a cluster of systems whose loss would cripple military production for the entire sector. The Storm Wardens committed their entire 1st Company and elements from 3 battle companies to the defense against Hive Fleet Dagon, recognizing that Tyranid threats required overwhelming force applied decisively before the Xenos could establish planetary footholds and begin consuming biomass to fuel their reproduction. The chapter's leadership coordinated their response with Imperial Navy elements and guard regiments being rushed to the threatened systems, though all parties understood that Space Marine forces would bear the brunt of the initial fighting, given their capability to engage Tyranid vanguard organisms immediately upon their arrival. The Storm Wardens librarians proved essential during planning phases, their psychic abilities allowing them to detect the approaching Hive Fleet's position and composition, despite the Tyranids' lack of conventional warp signatures. The first major engagement occurred in the void above Marque Prime, the March's primary industrial world and the most valuable target in Hive Fleet Dagon's path. Tyranid bioships emerged from the system's outer reaches in a swarm that numbered in the hundreds, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescence as they accelerated toward the inner system and their intended prey. The Imperial Navy engaged immediately, battleships and cruisers opening fire at maximum range with lance batteries and macro cannons that carved through Tyranid vessels with each salvo. The bioships absorbed tremendous damage before succumbing, their regenerative capabilities and redundant biological systems allowing them to continue functioning despite wounds that would have crippled conventional vessels. Storm Wardens strike cruisers operated as part of the Imperial fleet, their crews coordinating with Navy commanders to focus fire on priority targets, while the chapter's Thunderhawks and boarding torpedoes prepared for close-range operations. The Storm Wardens' void combat doctrine against Tyranids emphasized destroying bioships before they could deploy their cargo of warrior organisms onto planetary surfaces. Boarding actions against Tyranid vessels required different approaches than operations against ships crewed by sentient opponents, as the bioships themselves functioned as living organisms that responded to intrusion with immune responses rather than tactical countermeasures. Storm Warden squads that breached Tyranid hulls found themselves fighting through passages lined with acid-secreting membranes and defensive organisms that the bioships generated specifically to repel boarders. The confined spaces negated many Tyranid advantages in numbers and size, allowing Storm Wardens' battle brothers to employ flamers and meltaguns to devastating effect, while their power armor protected them from the corrosive atmospheres and biological weapons that filled the bio-ship's interiors. First Company veterans wearing Terminator armor proved particularly effective during these boarding operations, their heavy plate allowing them to advance through conditions that would have forced tactical Marines to fight more cautiously. The Terminators employed heavy flamers to purge entire sections of bioships, the Promethium flames consuming Tyranid organisms and organic ship systems with equal efficiency. Thunder hammers crushed through chitinous bulkheads and shattered the massive organs that served as bioships' vital systems, each strike disrupting biological functions that the vessels required to maintain cohesion. The Storm Wardens targeted specific organs that their apothecaries had identified as critical to bioship function, focusing their attacks on neural clusters and nutrient distribution nodes, whose destruction caused cascading failures throughout the living vessels. The Void battle lasted 3 days as Imperial forces systematically destroyed or crippled enough Tyranid bioships to break the Hive fleet's cohesion and force the survivors to withdraw. Storm Wardens' casualties during these operations included 24 battle brothers killed when bioships they were boarding suffered catastrophic failures that consumed the vessels and everyone aboard in massive biological explosions. Additional losses occurred when Tyranid warrior organisms managed to breach Storm Wardens' lines during particularly intense fighting in bioship interiors, the Xenos rending claws and bioweapons proving capable of penetrating power armor when concentrated attacks caught battle brothers in vulnerable positions. Despite these costs, the Storm Wardens achieved their primary objective of preventing Hive Fleet Dagon from establishing a significant presence on Mark A Prime's surface, those scattered Tyranid organisms that had been deployed before the fleet's defeat required months of ground operations to fully eliminate. The Scourge of the Pale Wasting demonstrated the Storm Warden's capability for sustained operations against Chaos forces that employed unconventional tactics and avoided direct confrontation whenever possible. The Pale Wasting referred to a region of space within the Calixis sector where multiple systems had fallen to a Chaos warband that specialized in corrupting planetary populations through subtle infiltration rather than overt military conquest. The warband's leadership included Alpha Legion operatives whose expertise in covert operations and long-term subversion made them far more dangerous than Chaos forces that relied purely on military strength. By the time Imperial authorities recognized the extent of the corruption, the warband controlled significant portions of 6 different systems and had established cult networks on dozens of additional worlds. The Storm Wardens' 2nd and 3rd companies received assignment to participate in the Imperial response to the Pale Wasting crisis, their forces operating alongside inquisitorial agents and guard regiments in a campaign that emphasized intelligence gathering and precision strikes over conventional military operations. The chapter's battle brothers found themselves conducting operations that differed significantly from their typical approach to warfare, as the enemy's dispersed nature and tendency to hide among civilian populations prevented the kind of decisive engagements that Storm Warden's doctrine preferred. Company captains worked closely with inquisitors to identify cult leadership and Alpha Legion operatives, using intelligence provided by inquisitorial networks to target individuals whose elimination would disrupt the warband's command structure and sever connections between different cult cells. The Storm Wardens conducted dozens of surgical strikes throughout the Pale Wasting campaign, small unit operations that inserted squads into hostile territory to eliminate specific targets before extracting without becoming engaged in extended fighting. These missions required capabilities that differed from the chapter's standard expertise, as success depended on stealth and precise intelligence rather than overwhelming force and aggressive assault. Scout squads proved particularly valuable during these operations. Their training in reconnaissance and infiltration allowing them to gather information about enemy positions and identify approach routes that allowed tactical squads to reach their objectives without alerting cult forces to the Storm Wardens' presence. The chapter's librarians employed their psychic abilities to detect cult psychers and identify individuals whose minds showed signs of chaos corruption, providing targeting information that allowed strike teams to focus their efforts on the most dangerous enemies. The campaign's climax occurred when inquisitorial intelligence identified the location of the Alpha Legion cell that had orchestrated the Pale Wasting's corruption, a heavily fortified facility on a moon that orbited one of the region's primary worlds. The Storm Wardens launched a full company assault against this target, recognizing that eliminating the Alpha Legion leadership represented the best opportunity to break the Warband's control over the corrupted systems. The assault proceeded through multiple phases, with orbital bombardment softening defensive positions before drop pods delivered Storm Warden squads directly onto the facility's surface. The Alpha Legion defenders fought with the tactical sophistication their legion was infamous for. Employing deception, the Vault of Remembrance exists as the Storm Warden's most closely guarded secret, a repository of knowledge so dangerous that access remains restricted to the chief librarian and a handful of senior officers who form the chapter's inner circle. Located deep within the Erie's foundations, carved into the living rock of Mount Scathar itself, the vault's entrance sits behind multiple layers of physical and psychic security that would challenge even the most determined intruders. The outer chambers contain records of standard chapter operations, battle reports and personnel files that any authorized officer might legitimately need to access. These mundane documents serve as camouflage, creating the impression of a conventional archive rather than a prison for memories deemed too catastrophic for the chapter to retain. The true vault lies beyond 3 separate blast doors, each weighing hundreds of tons and sealed with mechanisms that respond only to specific genetic signatures combined with psychic authentication. The chief librarian's presence activates the first door, his gene seed markers triggering recognition protocols built into the locking mechanisms. The second door requires a psychic key, a specific pattern of mental energy that only senior librarians know how to generate. The final barrier demands both physical and psychic authentication simultaneously, ensuring that no single individual could breach the vault through coercion or deception. Between these doors, the corridors contain automated defense systems that would activate if anyone attempted forced entry, servitor-operated weapons platforms programmed to eliminate intruders with extreme prejudice. Psychic wards permeate every surface within the vault complex, layers of protective energy woven so densely that the area registers as a blank spot to any psyker attempting to scan it from outside. These wards represent centuries of accumulated work by generations of chief librarians, each adding refinements and reinforcements to the protections established by their predecessors. The patterns inscribed into the stone walls glow faintly with psychic energy, visible only to those with witch sight who can perceive the currents of the warp. The wards serve multiple purposes beyond simple concealment, creating barriers that would alert the entire librarius to any unauthorized psychic probing, while simultaneously preventing demonic entities from manifesting within the protected space. Some wards target specific threats, patterns designed to counter Thousand Suns sorcery, or repel Alpha Legion infiltrators, whose psychic conditioning might allow them to bypass conventional security measures. The innermost chamber houses the actual records of the Storm Warden's founding and the events that necessitated the memory erasure. Data cores rest in stasis fields that preserve their contents against degradation. The crystalline storage, devices containing terabytes of information, recorded in formats that predate the chapter's official founding date. Physical documents occupy environmentally controlled cases, their pages treated with preservative compounds that prevent the ancient parchment from crumbling despite millennia of storage. Some texts are written in High Gothic, while others employ cipher systems that only the chief librarian possesses keys to decode. Psychically attuned crystals hold memory impressions extracted during the Great Forgetting, fragments of consciousness preserved in mineral matrices that would allow a sufficiently powerful psyker to experience the sealed memories as though they were his own. The nature of the knowledge contained within these records remains one of the Imperium's most closely guarded secrets, known completely only to those few individuals who have accessed the vault under proper authorization. What can be stated with certainty is that the Storm Wardens encountered something during their founding period that threatened not just the chapter, but potentially the wider Imperium. The decision to erase all memory of these events came from the chapter's original leadership in consultation with external authorities, possibly including inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus, whose expertise in matters of forbidden knowledge and memory modification would have proven essential for an undertaking of such magnitude. Theories regarding the specific nature of the sealed knowledge vary widely among the handful of Imperial officials who possess even fragmentary awareness that the Storm Wardens maintain such secrets. Some speculate that the chapter encountered a demon of such power that merely remembering its true name could provide it with a pathway to manifest in real space. Others suggest the Storm Wardens discovered evidence of corruption within their own ranks during the founding period, chaos influence that had compromised portions of the chapter before detection and elimination. A third theory proposes that the chapter's gene seed derives from a traitor legion, a heritage so damning that knowledge of it would result in the Storm Wardens' immediate excommunication and destruction despite their millennia of loyal service. The demon theory draws support from several factors, including the Storm Wardens' demonstrated expertise in combating warp entities and their librarius's unusual emphasis on anti-demon protocols. If the chapter's founding companies encountered a greater demon or similar entity and somehow survived the experience, the knowledge gained during that confrontation might include the demon's true name and the specific circumstances of its summoning. Such information represents exactly the kind of dangerous knowledge that the Imperium routinely suppresses through memory erasure or outright execution of those who possess it. A demon's true name provides power over the entity, but it also creates a psychic connection that the demon can exploit to influence those who know it. Erasing all memory of the encounter would sever this connection, while preserving the chapter's ability to function without the constant threat of demonic corruption hanging over every battle brother. The corruption theory finds evidence in the thoroughness of the memory erasure and the involvement of what appears to have been inquisitorial oversight during the process. If chaos influence had infiltrated the Storm Wardens during their founding, the standard Imperial response would involve the chapter's complete destruction to prevent the taint from spreading. The fact that the Storm Wardens survived suggests that the corruption was detected and eliminated before it could spread beyond a containable portion of the chapter. Memory erasure would then serve as a prophylactic measure, removing knowledge of how the corruption occurred and what warning signs preceded its detection. This approach would protect the chapter from future infiltration attempts that might exploit the same vulnerabilities, while allowing them to continue serving the Imperium after thorough psychic screening verified that no taint remained. The Traitor Legion gene seed theory represents perhaps the most explosive possibility, as it would fundamentally alter the Storm Warden's place within the Imperium if proven true. Several factors support this speculation, including the chapter's unusual psychic resistance and their combat preferences that align more closely with certain traitor legions than with any loyalist bloodline. The Alpha Legion's expertise in infiltration and the Night Lord's preference for close-quarters combat both show similarities to Storm Warden's capabilities, though such parallels could equally result from convergent tactical evolution rather than genetic heritage. If the Storm Wardens do carry traitor gene seed, the knowledge would explain the extreme measures taken to conceal their origins, as the Imperium maintains absolute prohibition against using genetic material from the traitor legions regardless of any practical considerations that might argue otherwise. The protocols governing access to the vault reflect the Storm Wardens' understanding that the sealed knowledge might someday prove necessary despite its dangers. The Chief Librarian bears sole responsibility for determining when circumstances warrant opening the vault, a decision that weighs the potential value of the information against the risks that accessing it creates. In the chapter's recorded history since the memory erasure, the vault has been opened fewer than a dozen times, each instance occurring during crises that threaten the chapter's survival, or when external authorities with sufficient clearance demanded access. Each opening requires extensive preparation, with the chief librarian conducting purification rituals and erecting additional psychic defenses before even approaching the innermost chamber. When the vault must be opened, the chief librarian never accesses it alone. At least 2 other senior librarians accompany him, warriors whose psychic strength and mental discipline qualify them to witness the sealed knowledge without succumbing to whatever dangers it contains. These librarians serve as both assistants and safeguards, ready to intervene if the chief librarian shows signs of corruption or mental compromise after exposure to the records. The group maintains constant psychic contact throughout the process, each member monitoring the others for any indication that the knowledge is affecting them in ways that suggest chaos influence or other forms of mental contamination. After accessing the vault, all participants undergo extensive psychic examination by librarians who were not present during the opening, verification that they have not been compromised by whatever they learned. The burden of secrecy weighs heavily on those few individuals who possess knowledge of the vault's contents. Chief librarians throughout the Storm Wardens' history have struggled with the isolation that comes from bearing information they cannot share even with their closest brothers. The knowledge contextualizes every decision the chapter makes, providing understanding of why certain practices exist and what threats the Storm Wardens must remain vigilant against. Yet this understanding cannot be explained to battle brothers who execute the chapter's orders without access to the reasoning behind them. Chief librarians must watch warriors die in battles whose true purpose remains hidden, must enforce security protocols whose necessity they cannot justify, and must maintain secrets even from the chapter master himself, unless circumstances absolutely demand otherwise. The psychological toll manifests differently in each chief librarian who assumes the position. Some withdraw into isolation, spending extended periods in meditation chambers where they process the weight of their knowledge away from other battle brothers, whose ignorance they must maintain. Others throw themselves into their duties with increased intensity, as though constant activity can distract from the burden they carry. Several chief librarians throughout the chapter's history have requested permission to enter the reclusium as chaplains after decades of service, seeking relief from their responsibilities through transition to roles where they can focus on spiritual guidance rather than bearing secrets that threaten to crush them under their weight. The Inner Circle provides limited relief from this isolation, as its members at least share awareness that terrible secrets exist even if they do not possess complete knowledge of the vault's contents. The chapter master, master of sanctity, and the 2 or 3 company captains who comprise the Inner Circle understand that the Storm Wardens' founding involved events so catastrophic that collective amnesia represented the only acceptable response. They know that the librarius guards knowledge that could destroy the chapter if revealed improperly, and they accept the necessity of maintaining security protocols whose full justification remains hidden from them. This shared awareness creates bonds between Inner Circle members that transcend normal command relationships, mutual understanding that they serve a chapter whose very existence depends on secrets they must protect without fully comprehending. The process of inducting new members into the Inner Circle occurs only when absolutely necessary, typically when a company captain has demonstrated decades of loyal service and proven his mental fortitude through countless battles against chaos forces and Xenos threats. The chief librarian conducts the induction personally, beginning with extensive psychic examination that probes every aspect of the candidate's mind for signs of weakness or corruption. This examination goes far deeper than standard screening, the chief librarian searching for any indication that the candidate might prove vulnerable to the psychological pressure that comes with partial knowledge of the chapter's secrets. Battle brothers who fail this screening never learn they were being considered for the Inner Circle, the chief librarian simply noting their unsuitability in records that only he can access. Those who pass the initial screening undergo a ritual that shares carefully controlled portions of the sealed knowledge, enough to provide context for the security protocols they will help enforce, but not so much that they become targets for the same dangers that necessitated the original memory erasure. The chief librarian employs psychic techniques that create compartmentalized awareness, knowledge that exists within the recipient's mind, but remains isolated from their normal consciousness, unless specific conditions trigger its accessibility. This compartmentalization protects the new inner circle member from being overwhelmed by what they learn while ensuring they can access the information when circumstances require it. The process takes hours and leaves participants mentally exhausted, their minds struggling to integrate new knowledge that contradicts or contextualizes everything they previously understood about their chapter. The physical security measures protecting the vault extend beyond the blast doors and automated defenses to include protocols that would destroy the entire complex if breach appeared imminent. Melta charges positioned throughout the vault complex can be triggered remotely, their activation reducing everything within to molten slag that would obliterate the records and prevent their capture by enemy forces. The chief librarian carries the activation codes at all times, psychic triggers embedded in his consciousness that would release if he died under specific circumstances, or if psychic examination revealed he had been compromised by chaos influence. These failsafes ensure that even if the Storm Wardens' fortress monastery fell to overwhelming enemy assault, the secrets within the vault would not survive to be exploited by those who conquered the Eyrie. Additional security protocols address the possibility of psychic intrusion by entities powerful enough to bypass the vault's wards through sheer force. The librarius maintains constant monitoring of the psychic environment around the vault, rotating teams of librarians who watch for any indication of external probing or attempted breach. These sentries undergo regular rotation to prevent fatigue that might compromise their vigilance, with no librarian serving watch duty for more than 4 hours at a stretch. The monitoring stations themselves occupy chambers adjacent to the vault complex, positioned close enough to detect subtle psychic disturbances, but far enough away that the wards protecting the vault do not interfere with the sentry's ability to sense approaching threats. The Storm Wardens have faced several attempts to breach the vault throughout their history, incidents that demonstrated both the effectiveness of their security measures and the determination of enemies who somehow learned that the chapter maintained dangerous secrets. One notable incident occurred during the 39th millennium when 1,000 Suns warband launched a surprise assault on Sacris, their forces including multiple sorcerers whose psychic abilities allowed them to locate the vault despite the wards concealing it. The Chaos forces penetrated deep into the Eyrie before Storm Wardens' defenders could organize effective resistance, the sorcerers blasting through outer defenses with psychic attacks that overwhelmed conventional security systems. The assault was only stopped when the chief librarian and every available librarian converged on the vault complex, their combined psychic strength creating barriers that even the 1,000 Suns could not breach. The battle that followed killed 3 Storm Wardens librarians and wounded a dozen more, but the vault remained secure, and the Chaos forces were eventually driven off with heavy casualties. Another incident involved an Alpha Legion infiltrator who had managed to assume the identity of a Storm Warden's battle brother through methods that remained unclear even after his eventual detection. The infiltrator spent months gathering information about the chapter's security protocols and the vault's location, preparing for an attempt to access the sealed records on behalf of his true masters. His plan was discovered only when routine psychic screening detected subtle inconsistencies in his mental patterns, anomalies that suggested psychic conditioning inconsistent with standard Storm Wardens training. The subsequent investigation revealed the infiltration, and the Alpha Legion operative was captured before he could attempt his breach. The librarius subjected him to intensive psychic interrogation that extracted information about how he had penetrated the chapter's security and what his handlers knew about the Storm Warden's secrets. The operative was eventually executed, but the incident prompted comprehensive review of security protocols and implementation of additional screening measures designed to detect similar infiltration attempts. The artifacts stored in chambers adjacent to the main vault represent another category of dangerous materials that the Storm Wardens maintain under strict security. These items were recovered during the chapter's founding period or shortly thereafter, objects whose properties or origins connect them to whatever events necessitated the memory erasure. Some artifacts radiate psychic signatures that would disturb unshielded minds, emanations that suggest exposure to major warp phenomena or contact with entities whose nature transcends normal reality. Others display physical characteristics indicating Xeno's manufacture, though the specific alien species responsible remains unclear, and the purposes the artifacts originally served can only be speculated about based on their observable properties. Each artifact occupies its own containment field within specially prepared chambers lined with psychic dampening materials and inscribed with binding wards. Servitors monitor the containment systems constantly, their augmented senses watching for any change in the artifact's behavior or energy signatures that might indicate activation or deterioration. The monitoring equipment includes devices that measure electromagnetic radiation, gravitational distortions, temporal anomalies, and psychic emanations across spectrums that human senses cannot perceive. Any deviation from baseline parameters triggers immediate alerts that bring librarians to investigate, their psychic abilities allowing them to assess whether the changes represent genuine threats or simply normal fluctuations in the artifact's dormant states. The Storm Wardens refuse to destroy these artifacts despite their dangerous nature and the resources required to maintain secure containment. The chapter's leadership views them as essential evidence that might someday prove necessary to understand threats related to their founding or to defend against similar dangers if they emerge again. This decision reflects pragmatic calculation rather than sentiment, recognition that destroying the artifacts would eliminate potential intelligence sources that could prove invaluable during future crises. The containment protocols ensure that the artifacts cannot be used against the chapter, while preserving them for potential future analysis under circumstances where the risks of study might be justified by immediate necessity. The relationship between the Vault's secrets and the Storm Warden's operational doctrine remains unclear to most battle brothers, though certain practices and preferences suggest connections that those with knowledge of the sealed history would recognize. The chapter's emphasis on psychic resistance training exceeds what most chapters consider necessary, suggesting awareness of specific threats that require such preparation. The librarius's extensive expertise in memory manipulation and psychic defense implies experience with enemies or situations where such capabilities proved essential. The Storm Warden's particular effectiveness against demonic incursions might derive from knowledge gained during their founding that, while consciously forgotten, influenced the development of anti-demon protocols through institutional memory that persisted despite the erasure of specific details. The sealed knowledge also affects the Storm Warden's interactions with other Imperial organizations, creating constraints that the chapter's leadership must navigate carefully. Inquisitors who request Storm Warden's assistance occasionally ask questions about the chapter's founding or gene seed lineage that cannot be answered honestly without revealing information that remains sealed. The chapter master and senior officers handle such inquiries through carefully prepared responses that acknowledge the gaps in their records without drawing attention to the deliberate nature of those gaps. This diplomatic approach has generally proven successful, though it occasionally creates tensions with inquisitors who suspect the Storm Wardens are concealing information that should be shared with proper Imperial authorities. The burden extends to relationships with other Space Marine chapters, as battle brothers from different chapters sometimes inquire about Storm Warden's traditions or history during joint operations. These questions, asked innocently by warriors seeking to understand their allies better, require responses that maintain the chapter's secrets while not appearing evasive or suspicious. Storm Wardens' battle brothers learned to deflect such inquiries through emphasis on their recorded campaigns and established traditions, directing conversations towards subjects they can discuss freely rather than origins they cannot explain. This practice has become so ingrained in chapter culture that most battle brothers handle such situations automatically, their responses shaped by training they received as scouts without necessarily understanding why certain topics remain off limits for discussion. The opening of the Great Rift in the closing years of the 41st millennium marked the beginning of the most catastrophic period in Imperial history since the Horus Heresy, a galaxy-spanning wound in reality that split the Imperium into two struggling halves and unleashed demonic incursions on a scale that threatened to overwhelm humanity's defenses entirely. The Storm Wardens watched from Sacris as the skies above their fortress monastery turned crimson, the Astronomican's light flickering and failing as the Cicatrix Maledictum tore through real space. Astropathic communications became unreliable or ceased entirely, leaving the chapter isolated from wider Imperial command structures and uncertain whether the Imperium itself still existed beyond the Calixis sector's borders. The Librarius detected massive disturbances in the warp psychic pressure that threatened to overwhelm their wards, and forced every available librarian to reinforce the protections around the Eyrie and the sealed vault. The initial weeks following the Great Rift's opening tested the Storm Wardens as demonic incursions erupted across multiple worlds within their operational theater. Chaos cults that had remained dormant for decades suddenly activated, their members empowered by the surge of warp energy flooding through the weakened barriers between real space and the Imperium. The chapter deployed all available companies simultaneously, spreading their forces across a dozen crisis points where demonic manifestations threatened to overwhelm planetary defense forces. Battle brothers who had trained for years to combat warp entities found themselves facing demon hordes whose numbers exceeded anything in the chapter's recorded experience, lesser entities pouring through tiers in reality that conventional weapons could not seal. The Storm Wardens' librarians worked to exhaustion maintaining psychic barriers that prevented complete demonic breakthrough, their powers the only reliable defense against enemies that ignored physical fortifications and appeared wherever the warp's influence grew strong enough to sustain manifestation. Captain Demetrios of the Third Company led operations on Sinofia Magna, an industrial world where a cornate incursion had manifested in the planet's primary manufactorum districts. The demons emerged in a wave of blood and brass, bloodletters and flesh hounds, materializing in locations where cult activity had weakened the barriers between dimensions. The Storm Wardens deployed via drop pod directly into the heart of the incursion zone, their assault timed to catch the demons before they could spread beyond the initial manifestation points. The battle that followed lasted 18 hours of continuous combat, squads fighting through streets running with blood, while bloodthirsters towered above the surrounding structures and bellowed challenges that drove unaugmented humans insane from sheer psychic pressure. Demetrios coordinated his forces through vox and telepathic links maintained by the company's librarian, directing squads to priority targets while avoiding concentration that would allow the demons to overwhelm isolated units through sheer numbers. The Storm Wardens discovered during these early engagements that their psychic resistance provided advantages beyond what they had previously understood, battle brothers maintaining combat effectiveness in environments where the warp's influence would have incapacitated warriors from other chapters. Demons attempting to corrupt Storm Wardens through whispered promises or psychic assault found their attacks sliding off mental defenses that functioned automatically without requiring conscious effort to maintain. This resistance allowed Storm Warden squads to advance through areas saturated with warp energy, pushing into zones where reality itself had become unstable, and the laws of physics operated inconsistently. The chapter's chaplains attributed this capability to the Emperor's blessing, though the Librarius privately speculated that whatever events had necessitated the memory erasure had left the Storm Wardens with inherent protections against the specific threats they had encountered during their founding. The arrival of the Indomitus Crusade brought both relief and complications for the Storm Wardens. Robute Guilliman's return as Lord Commander of the Imperium reached the chapter through fragmented astropathic messages that initially seemed too incredible to credit, reports of a Primarch walking among humanity again after 10,000 years of absence. The confirmation came when elements of the Crusades' fleet translated into the Calixis sector, massive battle groups accompanied by tech priests bearing the Primarch's seal and authority. These forces brought supplies, reinforcements, and most significantly, Primaris Space Marines created through Archmagos Belisarius Call's improvements to the Emperor's original work. The Storm Wardens received notification that they would be among the chapters reinforced with these new warriors, an announcement that created both anticipation and concern among the chapter's leadership. The integration of Primaris Marines into the Storm Wardens began with the arrival of several hundred warriors who had been created using the chapter's gene seed, but trained in facilities on Mars under Call's supervision. These battle brothers stood taller than their standard counterparts, their enhanced physiology incorporating additional organs and genetic modifications that pushed Space Marine capabilities beyond what previous generations had achieved. They came equipped with new marks of power, armor, and weapons patterns that incorporated technological advances the Mechanicus had developed during the millennia since the heresy. The Primaris Marines demonstrated combat capabilities that exceeded standard Space Marines in measurable ways, their improved physiques allowing them to carry heavier weapons, and their enhanced organs providing greater endurance during extended operations. Chapter Master Lorgath, who had assumed command of the Storm Wardens 3 decades before the Great Rift's opening, approached the Primaris integration with characteristic pragmatism. He recognized that the chapter needed these reinforcements given the casualties suffered during the initial demonic incursions, and the likelihood that the Era Indomitus would demand sustained operations beyond what the Storm Wardens' depleted companies could maintain. However, he also understood that incorporating hundreds of warriors who had never served with the chapter created security risks that required careful management. The Primaris Marines knew the Storm Wardens' reputation and basic organizational structure, but they possessed no knowledge of the sealed vault or the memory erasure that defined the chapter's true history. Their training on Mars had emphasized combat doctrine and tactical flexibility rather than the specific traditions and security protocols that existing Storm Wardens' battle brothers learned during their time as scouts. The Chief Librarian conducted extensive psychic examinations of every Primaris Marine before allowing them to fully integrate into company rosters. These screenings verified that the new warriors carried no taint of chaos corruption and assessed their mental resilience and capacity for maintaining secrets they would eventually learn existed without being told their contents. Several Primaris Marines showed signs of psychic potential, individuals who would require additional training before they could serve as librarians, but whose abilities made them valuable assets for a chapter that relied heavily on psychic capabilities. The examinations also implemented memory seals similar to those protecting the chapter's existing secrets, psychic barriers that would prevent external forces from extracting information about Storm Wardens' operations or internal security measures through interrogation or psychic probing. The practical integration proceeded through a system where Primaris Marines were assigned to existing squads as additional members rather than forming separate Primaris-only units. This approach allowed veteran Storm Wardens to mentor the new warriors in chapter traditions and combat doctrine, while the Primaris Marines contributed their enhanced capabilities and familiarity with new equipment patterns. Squad sergeants reported mixed results during the initial months, as some Primaris Marines adapted quickly to Storm Wardens' methods, while others struggled with differences between their Mars training and the chapter's established practices. The Primaris warriors had been taught to fight according to Guilliman's revised Codex Astartes, doctrine that emphasized the new equipment's capabilities and tactical flexibility that their enhanced physiology enabled. The Storm Warden's preference for aggressive close-quarters combat and boarding actions required adjustments that some Primaris Marines found difficult despite their superior physical capabilities. The equipment integration presented technical challenges that the chapter's tech marines worked to resolve through cooperation with the tech priests who had accompanied the Primaris reinforcements. The new Mark of Power armor required different maintenance procedures than the older patterns the Storm Wardens had used for millennia, and the weapons the Primaris Marines carried incorporated technologies that chapter tech marines needed time to fully understand. The bolt rifles that Primaris intercessors wielded offered improved range and penetration compared to standard bolters, capabilities that required tactical adjustments to maximize their effectiveness. The heavier Gravis armor worn by some Primaris Marines provided protection exceeding even Terminator plate in certain respects, though its bulk limited mobility in the confined spaces where Storm Wardens frequently operated. The chapter's fleet received significant reinforcement through the addition of new vessels constructed according to patterns that incorporated technological advances developed during Call's work. These ships featured improved void shields, more efficient plasma drives, and weapon systems that delivered greater firepower than the Storm Warden's existing vessels. The arrival of these ships addressed critical shortfalls in the chapter's naval capabilities, as several strike cruisers had been lost or severely damaged during the initial chaos following the Great Rift's opening. The new vessels allowed the Storm Wardens to maintain their operational tempo across multiple theaters while conducting the repairs and refits necessary to restore damaged ships to combat readiness. The strategic situation facing the Storm Wardens during the era Indomitus required constant adaptation as new threats emerged, and the nature of warfare itself changed in response to the galaxy's altered state. The Calixis sector found itself positioned within the Imperium Sanctus, the half of the Imperium that remained on Terra's side of the Great Rift and maintained relatively stable connection to the Astronomicon. This placement spared the Storm Wardens from the worst isolation that chapters operating in the Imperium Nihilus faced, though it also meant the sector became a staging area for Crusade forces pushing toward the Rift itself. The chapter coordinated with numerous Imperial organizations during this period, their operations intersecting with Guard regiments, Imperial Navy battle groups, Adeptus Mechanicus explorator fleets, and even elements from other Space Marine chapters, as the Imperium marshaled its forces for counteroffensives against the Chaos incursions that had exploited the Great Rift's opening. The Storm Wardens participated in several major operations during the Crusade's early years, their expertise in boarding actions and anti-demon warfare making them valuable assets for missions requiring those specific capabilities. The chapter's second company joined a strike force that assaulted a space hulk that had emerged from the warp carrying a warband of Emperor's children and their demonic allies. The operation required clearing the Hulk's twisted corridors section by section, fighting through environments where reality behaved unpredictably and Slaneshi demons employed psychic attacks designed to overwhelm victims with sensations that paralyzed normal humans and distracted even Space Marines. The Storm Wardens' resistance to such manipulation allowed them to maintain focus despite the demons' attempts at psychic assault, their squads advancing through areas where warriors from other chapters had to fall back or risk complete incapacitation. The integration of Primaris Marines into these operations demonstrated both their capabilities and the challenges of incorporating warriors with different training backgrounds into established tactical approaches. Primaris intercessors provided superior fire support compared to standard tactical Marines, their bolt rifles engaging enemies at ranges where conventional bolters lost effectiveness. However, their lack of experience with the Storm Wardens' preferred close-quarters tactics sometimes created coordination problems when squads transitioned from ranged engagement to melee combat. Veterans working alongside Primaris Marines adapted by adjusting their own tactics to leverage the new warrior's strengths, while compensating for their relative inexperience with Storm Wardens' methods. Over time, these mixed squads developed effective combined approaches that utilized both standard and Primaris Marines' capabilities in complementary ways. The question of how to maintain the chapter's secrets while incorporating Primaris Marines who had not undergone the same indoctrination as traditionally recruited battle brothers created ongoing challenges for the Storm Wardens' leadership. The inner circle expanded to include Captain Thuron, who commanded the 5th Company and had demonstrated both tactical excellence and the mental fortitude necessary to bear partial knowledge of the sealed history. His induction into the inner circle occurred through the standard ritual, though the chief librarian noted that the psychic barriers he implemented in Thuron's mind required modification to account for subtle differences in Primaris marine neurology. These differences were minor but significant enough that the librarius began researching whether Primaris marines required adjusted versions of the memory seals and psychic protections that standard Storm Wardens received. The Primaris marines themselves remained unaware of these concerns, focused on proving themselves worthy of the Storm Warden's name through performance in combat and dedication to their duties. Several Primaris warriors distinguished themselves during the early campaigns, earning recognition from their squad sergeants and company commanders through actions that demonstrated both individual skill and commitment to their brothers. A Primaris intercessor named Kairos earned commendation after holding a critical position against sustained demon assault for 6 hours, while the rest of his squad evacuated wounded battle brothers, his enhanced endurance allowing him to maintain combat effectiveness despite injuries that would have incapacitated standard Marines. Another Primaris warrior, Sergeant Alexios, led his squad in destroying a Chaos sorcerer whose powers had pinned down an entire Storm Wardens company. The sergeant's tactical thinking, identifying an approach route that allowed his squad to close with the enemy psyker before he could respond effectively. The Storm Wardens' librarius expanded significantly during the era Indomitus as psychic threats proliferated, and the demand for librarian support exceeded what the chapter's existing establishment could provide. Several Primaris Marines demonstrated strong psychic potential, individuals whose abilities manifested during combat operations or were detected during routine screenings. These warriors entered the same training programs that produced standard librarians, though the librarius discovered that Primaris psychers possessed capabilities that differed subtly from those of traditionally created librarians. Their enhanced physiology allowed them to channel greater amounts of psychic energy without suffering the physical strain that limited standard librarians, while their improved neural architecture provided better control over complex psychic techniques. However, they also showed different vulnerability profiles to certain forms of psychic attack, weaknesses that required adjusted defensive training to address properly. The chapter's operations during the era Indomitus extended beyond simple combat missions to include diplomatic and coordination efforts with other Imperial organizations. Chapter Master Lorgath found himself attending strategy councils alongside Guard Generals, Navy Admirals, and representatives from other Space Marine chapters, meetings where the Storm Wardens' experience and tactical expertise contributed to planning operations across multiple sectors. These interactions required careful management of information, as the Storm Wardens could not reveal certain aspects of their capabilities or operational history without risking questions about subjects that remained sealed. Lorgath navigated these situations through focus on practical matters and demonstrated results rather than theoretical discussions about doctrine or lineage, an approach that earned respect from other commanders while avoiding topics that might expose the chapter's secrets. The threat environment facing the Storm Wardens showed no signs of diminishing as the era Indomitus progressed into its second and third decades. Chaos forces continued probing for weaknesses in Imperial defenses, their attacks coordinated with a sophistication that suggested direction from powerful entities within the warp. Xeno's threats intensified as various alien species exploited the Imperium's distraction with chaos incursions to expand their own territories or conduct raids against vulnerable worlds. The Storm Wardens found themselves responding to crises that ranged from demon incursions to orc invasions to Drukhari slave raids, their operational tempo maintained at levels that would have broken lesser formations. The integration of Primaris reinforcements proved essential to sustaining this pace, as the new warriors' enhanced endurance allowed them to maintain combat effectiveness during extended campaigns that would have required standard Marines to rotate out for rest and recovery. The security of the sealed vault remained a constant concern, despite the chaos surrounding the chapter's operations. The chief librarian maintained the psychic wards protecting the repository, conducting the regular renewal rituals, even when circumstances made such activities difficult to schedule around combat deployments. Several incidents occurred where enemy forces demonstrated knowledge, suggesting awareness that the Storm Wardens maintained secrets worth discovering. Attacks that targeted the Eyrie specifically rather than simply representing opportunistic raids against a known Space Marine fortress monastery. An Alpha Legion infiltration attempt during the 5th year after the Great Rift's opening nearly succeeded in breaching outer security layers before detection and elimination, the incident prompting comprehensive security reviews and implementation of additional screening protocols for all personnel with access to sensitive areas. The Storm Wardens' future in the era Indomitus remains uncertain, the chapter facing threats to both their physical survival and the security of their most dangerous secrets. The integration of Primaris Marines continues, with new waves of reinforcements arriving periodically as the Imperium's production facilities on Mars and other Forge worlds generate additional warriors. Each new arrival requires the same careful screening and integration process that the initial Primaris Marines underwent, procedures that strain the Librarius's resources but remain essential to maintaining the barriers protecting the chapter's sealed history. The question of whether Primaris Marines will eventually comprise the majority of the chapter's strength creates concerns about how traditions and security protocols will be maintained when most Battle Brothers lack the cultural foundation that traditionally recruited Storm Wardens possess. The physical threats facing the chapter show no signs of diminishing. Chaos forces continue testing Imperial defenses, their attacks growing more sophisticated as the entities directing them learn from previous failures. The Storm Wardens expect that their expertise in combating demonic incursions will keep them at the forefront of anti-chaos operations for the foreseeable future, missions that will continue generating casualties despite the chapter's capabilities and experience. The Primaris reinforcements provide numerical strength that allows the Storm Wardens to sustain higher operational tempos than would otherwise be possible, but even enhanced Space Marines can be killed through overwhelming force or sufficient bad luck. The chapter's apothecaries work constantly to recover gene seed from fallen brothers and maintain the stocks necessary to create new warriors, their efforts essential to ensuring the Storm Wardens can replace losses and gradually expand their strength beyond pre-rift levels. The sealed vault and its contents represent perhaps the greatest long-term threat to the Storm Wardens' existence. The knowledge contained within those chambers could destroy the chapter if revealed improperly, regardless of their millennia of loyal service or their contributions to the Imperium's defense. The Chief Librarian and Inner Circle understand that enemies who discover the vault's existence will stop at nothing to access its contents, whether to exploit the information for their own purposes or simply to expose secrets that would force the Imperium to take action against the Storm Wardens. The constant vigilance required to maintain security around the vault diverts resources that could otherwise support combat operations, a cost the chapter accepts as necessary, but which creates ongoing strain on the Librarius and other elements responsible for protecting classified information. The Storm Wardens face their future with the same pragmatic determination that has characterized the chapter since their founding. They continue executing their duties without complaint, responding to threats across the Calixis sector and beyond, while maintaining the security protocols that protect their deepest secrets. The integration of Primaris Marines proceeds despite the challenges it creates, the chapter's leadership recognizing that adaptation represents the only path to survival in an era where the old certainties have been shattered and new threats emerge constantly. Whatever knowledge lies sealed within the vault, whatever events necessitated the memory erasure that defines the chapter's history, the Storm Wardens endure as they have for millennia. They stand ready to face whatever the era Indomitus brings, their storm shields raised against the darkness, and their weapons prepared to strike down the Imperium's enemies wherever they appear.